Good evening. Welcome to our guests and visitors in council chambers tonight, as well as those watching at home. As is our custom, we'll begin tonight's meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rosa, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Barnett,
Here.
Commissioner Jose,
Here.
Commissioner Wallace,
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit,
Here.
Commissioner Colvany,
Here.
Commissioner Gilmartin,
Here.
Commissioner Glover.
Here.
We're all here tonight. Fantastic. Is there a motion concerning minutes of previous council meetings?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the July 6, 2021 minutes as presented.
Second.
Any comments or questions from my colleagues? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Just like that, we are on to item 4 on our agenda tonight. This is the public comments portion of our meeting. This portion of the meeting is dedicated to folks who may have something they want to bring to our attention or point out that is not on tonight's agenda. We will have public comment at active agenda items and first reading agenda items later in the meeting. A couple reminders for all public comments, whether now or later in the meeting. Please state your name for the record. We do like to know who we're talking to. Please keep comments to 5 minutes or less. That gives everybody a chance. There's no need to repeat what others have already said. Please remember this is an opportunity to be heard, but it is not a debate. And at the excuse me, at the end there may be questions, and it may be a case where we have to get back to you later on some of those. So if there's anyone this evening that has public comment that they'd like to bring to our attention, come on down to the podium. Wow, everybody's here for a specific item. Fantastic. There was two remarks that were submitted electronically. They were a little bit lengthy. They will become part of the public record, and I believe they were also available at the end of the day today online as part of this meeting's agenda items. So if you're interested in that, please take a look at that. It'll become part of the record later. Item 5 is our consent agenda. Is there a motion concerning consent agenda?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries unanimously as well. Item 6, burning through our meeting. The active agenda portion of our meeting is the portion where we intend to take action on items previously discussed. These have typically been considered once, twice, sometimes many times over a long period of time prior to tonight, but we intend this evening to take action on those items. Is there a motion concerning a special use drive-through on Ogden Avenue?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt an ordinance authorizing a special use for 2500 Ogden Avenue to permit a restaurant with a side-by-side drive-through as presented.
Second.
Any audience questions or comments on this agenda item? Any council comments or questions? Rosa, please call the roll.
Commissioner Jose,
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace,
Aye.
Commissioner Glover,
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin,
Aye.
Commissioner Colvany,
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit,
Aye.
Mayor Barnett.
Aye. That motion passes unanimously. Is there a special use motion concerning another drive-through on Ogden Avenue?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt an ordinance authorizing a special use for 931 and 935 Ogden Avenue to permit a multi-tenant retail building with drive-through as presented.
Second.
Any audience questions or comments on this? Council questions or comments? I'll just remind those watching at home, the special use process has lots of pieces to it. One of them is that most drive-throughs in the village of Downers Grove operate under a special use. So sometimes we're up here proving what everybody thinks ought to be very normal, but it's part of our structure. Rosa, please call the roll.
Commissioner Jose,
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace,
Aye.
Commissioner Glover,
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin,
Aye.
Commissioner Colvany,
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit,
Aye.
Mayor Barnett.
Aye. That too passes unanimously. Is there a motion concerning rezoning downtown?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt an ordinance rezoning certain property located at 5240 Washington Street, 928 Maple Avenue, and 932 Maple Avenue as presented.
Second.
Any audience comments or questions on this item? please.
Good evening. My name is Paul Robertson. I'm with the Opus Group, 9700 Higgins Road in Rosemont. On behalf of the Opus team, I want to express our appreciation for the process that we've gone through. First, I want to recognize our neighbors, some of whom are here tonight. I think that their feedback and comments have made this a better project, and we appreciate their input. Second, I want to recognize the residents who spoke in favor of the project. It's not easy to come up here and stand in front of this and speak in favor. It's a challenge for a lot of people, so we appreciate that. I want to recognize the staff for working with us on very tight timeframes on the changes that we made. Often we were working on the fly to incorporate a lot of the things that we had done, and staff worked really hard, and we appreciate that, staff. I want to recognize the Plan Commission for the comments that they made, and the time that they gave us to incorporate those and give us the second hearing so that we could make those and in fact make the project better. And finally, I'd like to thank the Village Council and the Mayor. We really appreciate you recognizing the spirit of collaboration that we had with all of the stakeholders in the community. And we look forward to becoming a member of the downtown community. So thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions on this agenda item? Comments or questions from the council? Oh, I'm sorry. Please, come on down. Thank you.
Hi, I'm John Simowitz from 940 Maple, the Marquee Building. Sounds like it's a done deal. Is there a vote during the week? But anyway, I'm still here to say that the plan unit, or the change of rezoning should not be granted from downtown business to the plan unit development. One of the biggest issues, which is the density. I don't know how no one sees it, that there's just too much density going in. I think maybe another thing would be just other examples of it. One would be our classes. If we had 25 pupils in a class going to school, and we suddenly up that to 75 students per classroom, without making that classroom any bigger, what kind of quality education would we have? So that's all I got to ask about that one. The other one is, if you're selling your house for $300,000, and a buyer comes along and offers you $100,000, would you jump at that offer? I think I'd ask them to come back with a better offer. And that's all I got to say about the density. But the main concern is it's going to be, it's already, this is like deja vu. What happened is you granted Maple on Main to have special loading off the street with parking spaces. Well, that's not working out because you have the loading spaces there, but there's cars parked in them all the time. Anytime the garbage comes from, they have to park in the street in front of our building to load the garbage. All this is on our security cameras. You're welcome to view it, so you can back that up. The other big thing is, if you put these parking spaces in, you're taking away the parkway. And I was out there today, I walked the property, I measured it, and I have a wheel, measures the same like the state police use, so there's no doubt about the accuracy of it. And there was some discrepancy even in the reply that came back about the footage of line of sight. It said approximately 15 feet from the west line of the property, there's 30 feet. It comes out to only 25. And this is where the trucks are going to be parking. So we'll have 25 feet to look down the street to see what's coming at us. And Opus, for their people, they have 87 feet. Main on Maple, they have a lot more too. So that's it. The other thing I'd like to finish up with saying is, let's see, the Marquee driveway will be the only driveway with limited or blocked view on Maple Avenue in all of Downers Grove, because there is no parking on Maple Avenue. And all this was taken from the IDOT section 550.5 for driveway design, which it's kind of sad that, you know, we're going to have to put up with this, but if there's a problem, the state will step in afterwards. to correct anything that's not properly put in place. And thank you, that's all I got to say.
Thank you. Anyone else before I turn to the council? Okay, council questions or comments? Greg, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I apologize in advance for the length of my comments as I wasn't here during the first reading. But I want to thank my colleagues for what I thought was their very thorough discussion of the issues and the last staff presentation as well. I thought it was very well done. There have been a lot of concerns about density, a lot of concerns about traffic. Unfortunately, I think those concerns are unfounded. The project is actually less dense than Main and Maple, for example. And in terms of traffic, with apologies to the mayor, I think Maple is a more major street than people might realize. There's a significant amount of traffic already on Maple. There has been for many, many years. Long before this project is going to go up, long before some of the other projects that were built on Maple went up. A lot of people use Maple. It is fact. And the traffic study demonstrates that the condition of traffic on Maple is not going to be materially affected. I want to thank Opus for the flexibility that they've shown throughout this process, and I know staff worked very quickly as well. And I think the fact that the project has come forward the way it has, with the number of modifications we have seen, and the fact that it complies with our brand new design guidelines already, is just a large number of check boxes in favor of this project. But in terms of the project overall, I think we have to look at the context of the downtown area to really consider whether it meets all of the standards. And let me say up front, I believe it does. The multifamily residential, I'm going to read from our comp plan under multifamily residential. These uses are sited near or in commercial areas due to the benefits of higher density housing to support the nearby businesses, trends of car ownership, transit ridership among residents, and the fact that multifamily residential development is typically more resilient to the impacts of commercial development. Flipping to our residential policy recommendations, future multifamily development should be located near significant activity centers and along major roadways. Again, Mayor, I apologize, but Maple is fairly major. Turning to our the downtown key focus area portion of our comp plan, encourage greater residential density in the downtown edge to help facilitate a vibrant and energetic downtown. This project is in the downtown edge. As was pointed out last week, this is a catalyst site in our downtown. Reading from B11 on page 110, this site provides an opportunity for additional multifamily residential that is sensitive to the adjacent height and massing of nearby buildings. Let's pause for a second. Adjacent height and massing of nearby buildings. What's adjacent? Marquee on Maple and really Washington Avenue. This building is going to be approximately the same height as Marquee on Maple and the Main and Maple project. It is sensitive to the adjacent buildings. And finally, looking at the description of the downtown edge, it is described in part as an area of greater residential density to facilitate a vibrant and energetic downtown while providing economic sustainability to the core, meaning the downtown core. This comprehensive plan has been redone 2 times since I was up here and 3 times during the mayor's tenure. It was done with the input of many, many residents and more than a few of the folks that are up here on multiple levels. It was done very thoughtfully and carefully, and the project that we are about to approve is completely in accordance with the comprehensive plan and with the underlying zoning. And I look forward to voting in favor of it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Greg. Anyone else want to weigh in? Rich?
I agree with everything Commissioner Jose said. Thank you.
Concise. Nicole?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to thank the residents again who came out last week. I took notes. I know a lot of other people up here did as well. I took these notes to staff. I asked several questions. some of the key ones being on emergency vehicles, handicap parking, and the controlled parking in the area. Fortunately or unfortunately, you've now heard myself and Commissioner Jose read directly from the comprehensive plan. And this fits with our comprehensive plan, which is our guide that we use when we make decisions for projects in the community. Please know that I have heard you. I think we have heard you. And whether or not we agree on this particular issue, we've heard your questions and concerns. And believe me when I say all of us have gone and asked and inquired and questioned ourselves so we could make sure that we understood this project to the best of our ability as well. For those in Marquee and in the neighborhood, this is certainly going to affect your daily life. And I think all of us up here know that. You're going to have more noise. There may be more traffic in your space while, this is potentially being built. But unfortunately, that's kind of part of the development process. And I hope you'll remain patient as this process potentially moves forward, depending on the vote up here tonight. But please know that we have heard you, we've inquired, and I personally feel comfortable, given all of the information that I have in front of me, moving forward this evening. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sorry, Chris,
That's
go
okay.
ahead.
Excuse my voice. So I just want to support the comments my fellow commissioners have made. Just a couple more things I want to add as to why I'm supporting this as well. Part of the zoning criteria is to provide housing variety. I believe this checks that box, being compatible with the surrounding areas, as Commissioner Jose mentioned. There's also an opportunity here. I think the fact that all three individual property owners are combined in their desire to sell this property, and an opportunity for the village, for the developer to develop here may not come again. And I think that adds to the reason why I think we need to support this. The additional vibrancy with the additional residents is critical. Looked at the tax revenue implications. Those are all reasons I support it. There's a contribution to park districts and school districts of nearly $1 million. So that combined clearly with what I think is the most critical piece for me, in that the comprehensive plan is calling exactly for this type of development, is why I'm supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'm just going to touch on a couple of less technical issues. Commissioner Jose and Commissioner Wallace have done a good job of citing and referencing our planning documents and the fact that those have evolved over years with lots of input. But as Commissioner Jose said when he said apologies to the mayor, so I'm something like, 1,800 feet or 2,500 feet max from this development, 2 blocks away. I've lived there through no development on Maple to, prior to almost all of the buildings downtown. And what I think is at the heart of some of this is the angst that folks have about, we term it vibrancy when we're sitting up here trying to put a good spin on it, right? But as a resident, you're thinking, it's a pain, it's traffic, it's congestion. Those two are oftentimes together. And the simple fact is that document we're talking about and our actual experience has been that there is a little bit of that, but that the overall effect for the community is a net positive. This is not to say there won't be any changes to those that live in the immediate neighborhood. There will be. As Nicole said, there will be, particularly during construction. But our downtown is specifically designed and planned to have continuously increased vitality from residents and from business activities. Those catalyst sites, as they're referred to, are not all developed. There will be, ideally, if this council and the prior council and the one prior to that's goals are met, there will ideally be additional development downtown. And so I think sometimes it can feel like people aren't heard, and I hope the process shows that people are heard, even if maybe everything they asked for isn't given to them, because there were legit changes made. But there are also just differences of opinion about what the downtown should look like in 2030 as opposed to 2010. And that's part of what you're seeing play out here. So I fully support it. I know that I have every belief that it will continue to contribute to the goals and vision of the downtown in a positive way. And I know it's going to be some challenges along the way. The one resident that spoke last week made the comment, I think he lived on Washington, that when this construction first started, he was a little freaked out. But what he saw was the village and the community handling it. And I think that's what we're going to see again. There's no reason to expect we won't. So I'm looking forward to this development going forward. I'm looking forward to it being built and the construction being over with, like everybody else that lives in the area. But I suspect the village will continue to manage whatever comes of it in a positive way, and that it'll be a net positive for our whole community. So I'll be supporting this as well. Any other council comments? Rose, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Commissioner Kolovany?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski Fugit?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye. That motion passes unanimously. This process, for those that have been watching, probably know, has two more elements to it. Is there a motion concerning approval of a PUD?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance of the Village of Downers Grove, Illinois, to designate the property at 5240 Washington Street, 928 Maple Avenue, and 932 Maple Avenue as Planned Unit Development Number 64, and authorize a 167-unit multifamily residential development as presented.
Second.
Anyone from the audience want to comment further on this development? Council comments or questions? Rich?
Yeah, one quick comment as a result of the email that I got from a constituent. There was some misunderstanding about rezoning to a PUD. The PUD actually allows a petitioner to combine multiple lots, and the reason for that, unless you combine these individual lots, then each lot would have to be in accordance with the various zoning and building requirements on its own, including parking and things of that nature, and setbacks. So the PUD is a way of combining it. The 70-foot height and the setbacks did not change or did not increase. This property has been zoned at 70 feet since 2005. So I just wanted to correct that possible misconception. There was also another comment I'd like to add is we've received some comments that there's no parking downtown. And it's not entirely true. We have more of a walking problem than we have a parking problem, but we have 489 on-street parking spaces, 1,036 surface lot spaces, and 772 spots in the parking garage. Means we have 2,297 parking spots available in our downtown. Now, we did a traffic study. With COVID, we had to kind of put that away, but it's incumbent upon us to do a better job at wayfinding, letting people know where those spots are available. We do recognize that not everyone can park in front of Pierce Tavern because there's 100 other people there. Mayoral Monday made it easy. If they had 5 people in an afternoon, that was a really busy afternoon, and they could park right in front. So just wanted to correct that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Your council comments on this? Rosa, please call the roll.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Commissioner Kolovany?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski Fugit?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye. That motion passes unanimously. Is there a motion concerning an ordinance approving a special use?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt an ordinance authorizing a special use for 5240 Washington Street, 928 Maple Avenue, and 932 Maple Avenue to permit a 167-unit multifamily residential development as presented.
Second.
Last time this one's going to be in front of us. Anyone from the audience want to address this subject one last time? Council comments or questions? Rosa, please call the roll.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Commissioner Kolovany?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski Fugit?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye. That too passes unanimously. That ends the active agenda portion of our meeting. The seventh item on our list tonight is our first reading. This is the portion of the meeting where we take up subjects for discussion, sometimes continued discussion, sometimes our first-time discussion, but subjects on which we do not plan to take formal action this evening. Dave, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Barnett. Only one item on tonight's first reading agenda. It's a planned unit development amendment at Oak Trace. Here to provide additional information on this petition is our Community Development Director, Stan Popovich.
Thank you, Manager Fieldman. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. As Manager Fieldman noted, this is a planned unit development amendment for the Oak Trace Senior Living Centers. The property at 200 Village Drive is on the east side of Fairview Avenue, just south of 63rd Street, circled here in green. We can see the aerial showing the property outlined here in green as well. You can see an X-shaped building, which is a 5-story independent living building that was constructed in 1994. The building in the southeast corner, which is going to be in the lower right, is a healthcare center and assisted living building that was completed just a couple of years ago. In 2017, the Oak Trace is in front of you with this plan. You can see the existing X-shaped building there. Phase 1 was to be this healthcare and assisted living building, which was just recently completed. Phase 2 is the construction of a 5-story independent living facility with 160 apartments connected to the other buildings with a commons building, and then a modified change around to the internal road system, specifically that loop in front of the assisted living building. And then phase 3 was supposed to be the installation of these 13 residential living villas. As I noted, with the healthcare center being completed and then the pandemic hit, the plans have changed. We were just about ready to issue a permit, and then everything stopped due to the pandemic. So Oak Trace is requesting an amendment to the PUD. So if we look at the current situation of where the building is, 2 buildings that are out there on the site right now, with the existing drive aisle. We can see the existing little townhomes that are in the lower left-hand corner along the south property line. What Oak Trace is proposing now to build is a 5-story independent living facility here at this location. There'd be 145 apartments, so we can see that sort of the angle of the arms have changed a little bit there and extended further to the west there as well. And then they've also proposed a 1-story maintenance building in the northeast corner of the property on the upper right-hand corner there as well. And then again, there'll be the loop road here connecting the north loop to the south loop. This phase also does include improvements to the south entrance along Fairview Avenue to create more of a boulevard feel as you come into the property. And then that'll lead right to the new main entrance for the new building there at that location as well. Phase 3 includes the potential construction of some 3-story residential living villas in those areas outlined here in red. This will be market-driven and will require to come back before the council, as there's no definitive plans yet on that. If we look at some aerial images that the petitioners provided, this is from the front here. You can see the entrance with the improved entry there, and then the independent living building in the foreground. Well, I guess it's in the middle of the picture. And then here we can see from a view from the south with the independent living building to the left, the commons building in the middle, and then that's the existing healthcare center on the right-hand side. With regard to the comprehensive plan, it's identified as multifamily. It meets many goals of the comprehensive plan, including providing a variety of housing. It's located on an arterial street. It modernizes an existing community amenity, and it allows our residents to age in place here in Downers Grove. The Plan Commission found that the standards for approval were met and unanimously recommended approval at the June 6th meeting. Petitioners are here tonight as well, but if there's any questions I can answer for you at this time, I'd be happy to do that, Mayor.
Thank you, Stan.
Thank you.
Any questions from the council on this proposed amendment? In all the reading, this is going to sound really simple, but this is an awfully minor adjustment, right? This is really a slight change of arrangement with neighbors that are pretty much the existing facility, right?
Correct. It's just a slight change. The site plan changed enough that staff felt it was important to come back through, get approvals, and it's actually a reduction, I think, of about 15 units from what was previously approved in 17.
Okay. All right. Any questions or comments from the audience on this item? Okay. Yep. Please, come on up.
Hi, I'm Marie Becker. I was here last time on behalf of the Darien Club Homeowners Association. You can hear me, so I can see you. We do understand that this was approved previously and that this is just an amendment that's being filed and that phase 3 is yet to be approved. So first of all, thank you for allowing me to speak on this. I'm mostly commenting today on behalf of the nuisances that were created by the development. Some some of which Stan is aware of, and potential new ones that will be created as the other high-rise buildings will be built as part of Phase 2. We do have lighting nuisance issues, as well as noise and views, unsightly views of utility boxes and other items. We also recognize that we are at the mercy of Downers Grove and Oak Trace, because much of this has been approved. So as I pass these pictures along to you, imagine that this was your backyard of your $1 million home, and that you are now looking at high-rise buildings, which I will give copies at the mayor there. Burnett, I'll give you a copy of this so you can see it and share it with your constituents. Oak Trace has built a beautiful and profitable community. Downers Grove has benefited with millions of dollars in tax revenues, which will be ongoing. On the other hand, Darien has not benefited at all, and we have only been negatively impacted by the nuisances. In fact, our lowest property value resale, which was sold as a loss, directly backs to Oak Trace. I'm a real estate agent. Stan could provide you with that information by email, okay? So what I'm asking, number one, of Downers Grove, can you please do the as-built photometric readings for the existing as well as the new plans going in to be sure that they pass? We will conduct our own as well, but we're asking you to do that because there is a significant amount of light coming from these buildings shining down into the homes that are right along the barrier at the bottom there. Understand that most of Darien Club homes have their master bedrooms on the back side, so these lights are shining in. And if you have any readings in hand, we would love you to share them with our homeowners association. So that's what we ask of Downers Grove. Of Oak Trace, as a good neighbor, we ask them to, one, provide us with a landscape plan that was approved to screen the existing developments. We do not believe that any landscape was added as a barrier between Oak Trace and Darien Club, specifically the homes that begin at Fairview and go all the way down to the first 4-story building that was built there. There was some existing greenery that was there that is deciduous, leaves fall, and all the lighting comes through for the 6 months before the trees bloom. We also ask Oak Trace to consider putting privacy film on these high-rise story buildings, such the same type that you would see on other commercial buildings or in buildings of this type in Chicago. We're a suburb. We didn't expect to live next to this. I don't back to this community. I would have definitely hired my own lawyer if I did. I am in Darien Club. I'm negatively impacted by it, though, as I know one home sells at a lower value, it will eventually affect my home. So we're asking Oak Trace out of courtesy to please put the proper film on these windows. I know they have attempted to put blinds on these windows. They did not suffice. We are also asking Oak Trace to please consider this landscape barrier that was already committed and install it on the barrier between the two properties, Oak Trace and then Darien. Needs to be evergreen, needs to be tall, not arborvitae, needs to be evergreen trees such as white pines. We're at your mercy. We can only ask. That's what we're asking. Mayor, I'll give you a copy so that you can see the letter.
Marie?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry. There's a letter from a resident in there, and there are pictures. Imagine that is your home. Thank you.
Marie, can I ask you one question just so I can get as clear a picture as possible? It sounded, what we're considering here is a change to this PUD that affects essentially the layout of these two internal additions. It sounded like most of what I heard was really reflecting on the existing two buildings, right? Is that accurate?
I think that the addition of the buildings will in fact continue to affect Darien Club. They're 5-story versus 4-story. And the amendment specifically, which changed the entrance to the more southern entrance, that will definitely have more of an effect on Darien Club as well, with the noise and traffic coming through there. Does that answer your question?
I think so, yeah. I'm just looking at an aerial view, trying to get my head in the right
I know
spot.
I'm throwing
Thank
a lot
you.
at you. That's why I typed the notes.
Okay, thank you. The other, please, come on down.
Hello. My name is Vince Onigan. I lived at 1918 Sweetbriar Dairying Club. My property is just south of the Oak Trace community. Before I start, I want to read a portion of a letter that was originally submitted with the proposed PUD back in 2017. It's dated March 17th, 2017. It's addressed to Mayor Martin T. Tully, and it's also addressed to the Village Council. The letter is from MPS Law. They're the attorneys for Oak Trace. The purpose of the letter is to address Section 28.12.040.C.6, which is the review and the approval criteria for the Downers Grove zoning ordinance. They are addressing the concerns that came out from the Planning Commission public hearing. Okay, with that set up, I'm going to read page 4, item E. This is the concern, and this is the lawyer's response to that concern. So here's the concern. Whether appropriate terms, conditions have been imposed on the approval to protect the interests of the surrounding property owners and residences, existing and future residents of the PUD and the general public. Here's the response from the lawyer. Effect on the surrounding properties, owners, and residences. That's the title of the response. As noted above, to minimize adverse impacts on the surrounding properties, owners, and residences, Lifespace, Oak Trace, has planned to construct the taller buildings at the center of the site with the construction of the lower buildings around the perimeter of the site. And it will be constructing berms and substantial landscaping around the site perimeter. That's their response. Okay, there are two things I want to highlight in that response. Number one, to minimize adverse impact on the surrounding properties, owners, and residences. Number two, it will be constructing berms and substantial landscaping around the site perimeter, the property line. So please keep that in mind. The last time I was here was on June 7th. I opposed of two things. I opposed the reusing the existing side yard setback of 31 feet, number one. Number two, I was opposed to the building heights of the perimeter villas, which are just south of there, going from a single townhome story building to a 3-story building. With that said, let's talk about item number one that I wanted to that I opposed, which is a 31-foot setback. I want to put it in some type of context, what 31 feet actually means. If you go to the parking lot, a standard parking stall is 18 feet deep. You put 2 parking stalls back to back, you get 36 feet. You back off 5 feet, you get 31 feet, right? Math. Okay. So when you guys go home tonight, go to the parking lot, put your feet right on the parking stripe, and imagine 2 parking stalls back to back, and go back off 5 feet. That's how close those villas, 3 stories, are going to be from my property line. Number two, what I opposed, was the apartment villa heights. Now I estimate that these villa heights will be about 55 feet. Using a floor-to-floor height of 15 feet times 3, that's 45, plus a 10-foot roof. That's 55 feet. The existing landscaping around my perimeter between Oak Trace and my property is about 45 feet. Those are the existing trees. So those villas are going to be towering over the existing landscaping, okay? They hide the 1-story existing villas or townhomes. Now, what they're planning or what they're proposing on phase 3 is going to tower over that, okay? So let's go back to the letter. Item number 2. It said it will be constructing berms and substantial landscaping around the site perimeter. I have a question to Oak Trace. Have they? Have they installed berms and substantial landscaping at the site perimeter in phase 1? I don't think so. We have the photos, okay? Why did they put the item of constructing berms and substantial landscaping in the response? I think it's 2 reasons. For number 1, to provide a physical barrier, and number 2, to provide a visual barrier. I don't think they've installed any of that in phase 1. That's the reason why we have the light issues. We are going to have light issues on phase 3 moving forward. So when Oak Trace or somebody from their team, they can answer to that point. Keep in mind that there's a 10-foot utility easement between the two property lines, 10 feet on their side, 10 feet on our side. If a utility company does not allow them to build the substantial landscaping, which they're responsible, what say that they were going to do, will not allow them to install this substantial landscaping within that easement, I would expect that they would do the right thing and still do what they were going to say and install this landscaping so that we can provide the visual barrier. Okay, let's go back to number 1.
Are you getting close?
I have 5 minutes, right? Where are we
Yeah,
at time?
yeah.
I'm good?
You're close.
Okay,
I was acknowledging that you had 5 minutes.
okay. All right. So,
Keep in mind, we're talking about Phase 2.
I know, but
PUD hang on. I'm going to let you continue. We're talking about Phase 2 PUD improvements. If there are problems with the implementation of Phase 1, we'd like to get a chance to address those. We can't debate them here tonight, and I suspect nobody up here is going to know the answer to your questions. They're good questions, and like you saw in the Maple and Washington process, everybody up here is taking notes, and we'll get answers to these questions. But I think we understand that you guys have light concerns. You're questioning whether the proper screening was put in for Phase 1, and Phase 3's got you a little rattled. But we're focused tonight on Phase 2 PUD adjustments. So just keep that in mind, please.
okay. I'll wrap it up soon. So, I lost my train of thought here. So in short, those are the two things that I'm opposed of, is the, in Phase 3, the setback of 31 feet. If you take that 31 feet and you minus the 10-foot easement, you got 21 feet left, right? 10 feet minus 31. And that's basically one car parking stall, a little bit more. And that's what I'm trying to use as a frame of reference. So those are the two things I'm opposed of. And I realize that this is not the purview of this meeting, and that's the reason why we're here. But I wanted to voice our concerns from me as a resident and Darien Club before it's too late. Before they come back and propose Phase 3, and having spent a lot of money and time in the planning and the development of Phase 3. So I wanted to make sure that our voices are heard prior to that investment of time and of design and planning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other comments on this proposed PUD amendment? Additional comments from council? Rich? No?
You can start to your left.
Oh, Chris, you got a question?
No.
That was quick. Just like that. Yeah, I'd be interested in seeing some of these mitigation issues. The fact that, you are not in Downers Grove doesn't matter as far as our considerations. When I was on Plan Commission, that issue came up on, property that was across the street from Westmont, and we were not only allowed but encouraged to take the input from residents of Westmont, just as we are the residents of Darien. I like the changes you made. I know that we do have photometric requirements and what the reading should be at the lot line. We also have noise requirements, ordinances that take care of that. I do like the idea of having a berm and then putting some kind of landscaping. Years ago, I attended a church in Naperville that was doing a major expansion right to the back of a residential property, and the church had been there for years and years. And through landscaping and berming, it was amazing the kind of buffer that they were able to put in that really looked great and really kind of shielded those residents from, was more of a commercial kind of thing. So if Oak Trace can accomplish the same thing here, I think that would be wonderful for Downers Grove and for our neighbors in the Darien Club.
Other comments or questions? Stan, in preparation for the next time we talk about this, I guess what I would like is just our opinion, our staff opinions on the PUD, the first PUD, and whether or not the Phase 1 work was done in accordance with our expectations and our existing ordinances. That's it. That's all I've got.
And that ends our first reading tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Item 8 is our attorney's report.
Thank you, Mayor. One item to present tonight, and that is an ordinance approving a planning and development amendment to PUD 32 for Oak Trace Senior Living Community at 200 Village Street. Thank you, Mayor. That is all I have tonight.
Thank you. Item 9, Mayor and council member reports. An opportunity, as we've been doing, for council members to report out on goings-on in the community or other agencies or boards and groups they might be a party to. And I think we should end on the left. So we'll start tonight with Rich.
No report, Mayor, thank you.
Leslie.
No report, Mayor.
Nicole.
I have a quick report. Rotary Grove Fest needs volunteers. Our fest is run entirely by volunteers, so we need you. You can register to volunteer and help us at rotarygrovefest.com/volunteers. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I have no report this evening.
No report, Mayor, thank you.
Chris.
A couple things. The DuPage County Health Department, in connection with over 30 organizations statewide, have announced that July 15th is the first annual Pool Safely Day in DuPage County. Drowning is the #1 cause of unintentional deaths for children ages 1 to 4 in our country, and this day is really designed to raise awareness around pool and open water safety in an effort to prevent child drowning. So there's more information and safety tips that can be found at poolsafely.gov. And also, while we're enjoying the loosening of our restrictions, moving more and more towards opening up, let's remember that the single most important and effective protection against this virus is far and away the vaccines. As expected, the Delta variant has become the most prominent version of this virus. It's more contagious and is now causing the number of hospitalizations and deaths to rise, almost exclusively in people who are not vaccinated. So, if you are not already, please protect yourselves, your family, your fellow residents and community by getting vaccinated. Downers Grove North is having a vaccination event tomorrow from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., free of charge, vaccinating anyone over 12 years old. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Glover, anything going on in the community down there?
I have a small report. I'm not sure.
Not this big?
I'm not sure if this is what council reports are for, but we'll discuss that later.
It is time.
And yesterday at 3:46 p.m., my wife and I brought into Downers Grove the newest resident, Cameron Daniel Glover, was born, healthy baby boy, and mommy and baby are all good. So that's my report.
Congratulations. Fantastic. We are not going to end this meeting here. We are going to take a short recess. We will reconvene in the committee room next door. We're going to talk a little bit, as was alluded to, about some of the council dynamics, what we expect of each other, how we interact with the public, and make sure we're all on the same page with a couple of new members. So give us about 5 minutes, and we'll pick it back up over in the committee room. So we've moved over to the committee room this evening. We've got a scheduled debate or discussion or conversation, however you want to frame it up, on council governance. What is council governance? Council governance is big umbrella description of the way we interact with each other and the public and what our expectations of each other are. And so we just want to try and be sure we're on the same page. There are probably multiple opinions within 7 opinionated people on any one of these subjects. And so it's important that we understand what to expect from each other. One of the big challenges that this group has done, I think, a really good job with thus far, and frankly most of the councils have, is managing that interaction with each other. We're here to do the people's business, and it's hard to sit in these chairs and not have pretty strong opinions about things, and we still got to work as a group. So that's part of what we're going to talk about tonight. You'll see a little difference in that this will be largely a conversation amongst ourselves, led by me, as opposed to a whiteboard conversation led by Dave. And that's by design as well, because this is about us and each other. So I think everybody has this memo, right? Mm-hmm. One subject I think everybody knows, but for the public that may or may not be watching or might watch later, one subject that is out there is the subject of boards and commissions. There are a lot of elements to that, how they're used, how we expect them to be used, how they're staffed, how they're appointed, how we interact with them. We thought that was a big enough subject that we're going to make a meeting just about that. It is important. I think everybody here would like to talk about it, but we've got a little bit of a list, and that would probably take up the whole evening. So expect another meeting on that subject sometime in the very near future. So for anybody keeping score at home, we're not ignoring that subject. I guess I'd like to just go through the memo. I think that might be the easiest thing, and ask people to question things if they have questions, suggest something that they wish was different or that they're uncomfortable with. We're not going to, take a bunch of votes here. We're going to talk to each other and talk with each other and try and get to some progress. And frankly, I think it's probably a pretty short list of disagreement, but let's start down the road. Council meetings. Some of these things we may touch on, and they may be everybody shrugs their shoulders and we move right on. Are there any parts of our meeting, that are less than satisfying to people or that they wish were different? I'm going to go ahead and start, just to give everybody a little freedom, right? This is something I am disappointed in. Doesn't lend itself well over in that facility next door to a dialogue that's like this. And that has been a lamentation of mine for a decade now. It's something that I hope gets addressed with a new facility, but I hope that everybody knows, as uncomfortable as that is, it's best if we are able to discuss. We struggle with that. If you look at our first readings, we struggle a little bit just to talk to each other, and I think that's partly because of the physical nature of it, but I'd like us to work at that. We're not going to have a new building tomorrow. We're not going to have a new building come budget time. And so talking to each other in the meetings is probably something we could all, I wish we could improve on. I certainly could do better at it. Any other thoughts on council meetings or dynamics of the way our meetings operate? Nobody's got anything?
Well,
All right, perfect. I like
I
that.
always like to give the veterans an opportunity to talk first.
Glad you didn't say old people.
No.
Yeah.
I think I'm in that category with this group. No, I think I just want to echo that sentiment as a new member of the council. I think I'm going to work harder to communicate more on the dais in a discussion manner. I think oftentimes it feels a bit buttoned up already as we're up there and in first reading, while we're all receiving the information in advance and reading through it all. I think I would like to see more of that discussion, as you mentioned, because I get a lot of value out of what you have to say, whether I agree with it or not. I think it's important to hear the perspectives. And I think as we look to some of the upcoming issues, with any issue, I think it is important to sort of try to hear from you all. I also feel like there should be more opportunity to ask questions of each other as we're talking. I feel like we sort of state our position and we state where we stand, and it's not to call anyone out by any degree, but there's sometimes when I'd like to understand a little bit more of where that position came from, or a little more of where your ideas are coming from. So any way we can foster that would be something I would support.
So it would seem important along those lines to all of us are able to get into the position into the sort of mind state of somebody asks a question on the dais in front of the camera on a hot subject, that it isn't sort of like a threatening kind of
Right.
that it's not an attack, that it's, because if one of the things that I've missed and that I think we really would benefit from is when Chris asks a question of Nicole, we all benefit from listening to the answer, and it might spark who knows what in any of us. And when we don't do that, we don't engage in that for whatever reason, partly because of the physical nature of it, we're missing opportunity to learn from each other and grow from each other and help each other. So I think to Chris's point, one of the things we have to all sort of commit to is the idea that when somebody asks a question in the heat of a moment, it's just a question, right? That it's
Yeah.
not a punch you in the face kind of thing. So that's two ways. That's the receiver, right? But it's also how the question's asked. Got to work at that.
And then I think we need to make sure that if we're going to take that approach, that it is not combative. I think councils in the past, it has gotten very heated and turned into, I think, a lack of professionalism and a lack of respect for one another. So I think that's a fear of mine in particular, because I've seen it happen. I've watched it happen. And I certainly would never want, I feel like we've worked well as a group for quite some time. And now with the addition of, Danny and Chris, we have worked very well together. And so I just want to make sure that if we take that approach, which I don't disagree with, that we make sure that it's respectful and professional, and keep that in mind as we're engaging in sometimes very emotional, sensitive topics to ourselves and to the community.
Yeah, one of the things we've really, I think has become almost a mantra is tough on issues, easy on people. And I think we have to be very careful not to upset that, because, I don't necessarily disagree with the idea. I mean, I ask questions for a living, right? But we have to, I think there's a way to approach it in terms of, making it more of a statement in terms of, hey, maybe I'd like to hear more about this idea. Or using the opportunity to question staff and ask them a particular question that'll bring out additional information to shed light on something that's been said. So I think there are different techniques we can also use that can get the same sort of effect, but no, not necessarily, have you in a position where you're going, hey, Rich, give me more on this, or something like that. So.
It's a good caution. It's a learning thing. We're all going to have to take steps in that direction and learn how to do it better than we have, being mindful of some of the electric rails that are out there to bump up against.
Well, I think part of it is we may be treating it as our turn at bat. So we're going to get all our points either, typed out or written from notes. And I think if we had more iterations and took it in more bite-sized chunks, it would give us the opportunity to get more interface going on. This council doesn't spend a lot of time on the phone over the weekends discussing these things, so there are a lot of things we're hearing from our peers on the dais. So the public is hearing my thoughts at the same time you all are.
Yeah, Rich, that's a really good point. It's not necessarily, especially during a first reading, it's not necessarily a one-shot and you're done. I'm guilty of grabbing the floor 3-4 times on this topic or that topic. And I would encourage everybody to do the same. If a new thought occurs to you, or you've got a question, or you want a new piece of information that staff might have to research, put it out there. Yeah.
And I think I probably should have been more clear. I think that's the area where I feel like that ability to sort of ask questions that's the right time, I feel. So, and it's questions, not questioning, right? It's understanding, not sort of trying to figure out how I'm going to, say something or walk someone down a path. It is the first reading. It is trying to understand where people's heads are as we make these decisions.
There's value for the public too. I think we all received an email a week or two ago, kind of wondering where we were on some things, and that.
Yeah.
It's not always the case, but it is sometimes true. In my 10 years up here, there's been a lot of time when people say, well, this seems like a done deal. And I think it's a natural takeaway when we're not talking to each other. It's if we don't say anything or we don't ask anything, and then we make a decision, it's got to feel that way. It's to Rich's point. We're just all taking it in right there. But if we can, there may be some benefit too to the public of us asking more questions, engaging it a little better up there particularly in our first reading sessions, or second reading, or eighth reading, or wherever we are. We're just going to work through this list.
I do have a minor suggestion around flow. I think it's useful when staff and/or the petitioner makes their statement, and then the next thing would be for council questions, and then open up to public council questions and clarifications, then open up to public comment, and then only after we hear the public do we then, give our opinions. Because, we're telling the people we're listening to them. Now, last week was a good example because we had plenty of emails, so there were not a lot of surprises from the podium, but I think the public's expectations are at least listen to what I have to say first and then make your comments.
Sure.
And, the Plan Commission does it that way, and sometimes it's a little bit confusing, but the upfront part is just if you have any questions, anything that wasn't clear, throw it open to the public, and then we have our deliberations and more than back and forth.
You guys are taking notes, right? I won't be able to keep up with this. Thanks, Rich.
You're welcome.
Not everything needs commentary, but Friday mayor meetings, everybody understands how that goes. Anybody feel uncomfortable about that or wish it was different? All right, publication of council meeting agenda materials, the timing of those, I think, is really the question here. The content is pretty straightforward, but the timing of that, everybody understands why and when and things.
I like the fact that we don't get the agenda or the packets before the public does.
Yeah, an important note for anybody that's watching at home. We are trying to be transparent, and sometimes we say that, and I think people don't necessarily know what really goes into that, and that's one of them. Those packets are out, made public at the same time they're given to us. So keep that in mind. Monday morning phone calls. We have a process here where after everybody's had a weekend or so with a packet and with an agenda, the village manager's circling around and trying to elicit questions and see if there's subjects that have come up from that. Does anybody wish that process was different timing-wise or format or anything like that?
I just want to publicly thank Manager Fieldman for calling me at 6:20 a.m. Thank you.
At your request, just to clarify.
Definitely at my request, but thank you.
All right, responses to council questions. That's something that has made a little evolution in my time up here. Is that process right now is again to try and put full transparency on things. The questions that have come up, that are particularly those that are substantive, we try to make sure that everybody has the same information. What's everybody means? It means the council. It also means the public. And so that's part of the reason for that process. Between the Friday afternoon and the Tuesday just before the meeting, there are things that come up that additional clarification or information is added, and we're trying to make sure everybody's on the same page and has access to it. Any part of that somebody wish it was different?
No, I think, though, just to be clear, we're talking about the questions that council has based on the issues on the agenda that are answered back by staff as opposed to questions from the public.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
Okay? All right, keep moving. 3 council meetings a month. In the history of Downers Grove, there have been meetings that started here and moved over there. There have been meetings every week. There have been meetings with different frequencies. I think we felt a few years ago, it's been this way for a while, that 3 was kind of sufficient, and it gave us room to have us schedule another meeting if something really came up that was necessary. I don't think we've done that very often, but it provides sort of that opportunity, right? If we plan for 3 weeks and the wheels come off, we've got a 4th. Any thoughts on that? You want them at 6:30 in the morning?
Heck yeah. No, then I wouldn't make it to work on
I think it was also useful to note that staff has work to do other than prepare for our meetings, so
Yeah.
some of these meatier things, they need to be left alone to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not that Dave doesn't love getting our texts on the weekends.
Yeah, I think the only thought I had was as it pertains to long-range planning. I think I understand why they're piggybacked on a council meeting, a Tuesday night meeting. having gone through a couple now, and certainly in my private life, my professional world, sometimes that gear of thinking about the short-term or the immediate actions we're taking on council and then moving into a long-range plan can sometimes feel a little, I don't want to say rushed, but it feels a little bit disconnected, coming in not totally in the mindset of now I have to think long view versus what we're dealing with on the normal Tuesday. So I'm not suggesting that we necessarily move it to a separate night, but there may be some benefit on some of the larger ones. We talked a little bit about like things like boards and commissions as a separate meeting. I know it will be the same night. But just to give a little more focus on that as opposed to jumping out of whatever the multiple topics that we're dealing with on a Tuesday night council meeting into planning.
One of the things that we've tried to do with that is break them into the small pieces. There were times when we had planning meetings on Saturdays. And those there's, as you're seeing, there's a weaving, there's a spaghetti mess of how one subject affects another. And so by trying to break them into sort of bite sizes, those long-range planning meetings go for months at a time. Really, if you kind of consider that whole process, it's almost 6 out of every 12 months is spent in some sort of planning mode. And I suspect that's kind of part of why that happens. That's not to say it couldn't be adjusted, but because there's always a dovetail to the next subject. I think that if we tried to separate those meetings from the others, the opportunity to have them would be too infrequent. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, as long as I'm making sense that I'm talking about having a council meeting in chambers or daily, the weekly stuff that we're talking about, and then moving 5 minutes later into that sort of strategic mindset. That's all.
So Bob, to your point, have we only done budget meetings on Saturdays, or have we ever done I can't remember because of COVID, or have we ever done a long-range planning meeting on a Saturday? Or both?
I think
I know we've done budgets.
I think
we've done budget.
I'm going back too far, but there were meetings that were on Saturdays that were a lot longer, and it may have been a compressed budget meeting. There was so much budget.
Yes, because I remember sitting in on Saturday meetings in this room even, talking about, it must have been budget at some point.
Fire station, we had some meetings there.
Yeah, and fire station, right. Okay.
It's been at least since 2008 or 9.
Okay.
Saturday strategic planning.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sounding old.
We had a
But
facilities-related meeting here on a Saturday.
Yeah, but I feel like we've been in here for other stuff since then, but maybe it was budget, or maybe we decided to do a coffee with the council.
The fire
that
station was
open
the
house?
coffee with the council for budgets.
For budget.
No, but before that, we
Well,
used to have actual, like, full-blown, multiple-hour budget hearings on
Yes.
Saturdays in October.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I'm thinking of.
We also
Okay.
had, I think, Enzo was
They were
just saying,
planning.
two meetings regarding facility planning, open house formats in here.
Right.
I think 1 or 2 were on Saturdays, a couple were weeknights.
Yeah. Okay. I know, I'm just confirming that at some points in time, we do separate so that we aren't having to make that mindful transition.
Yeah.
Which I understand what you're saying. But, yeah.
If we want to keep that process as extended and drawn out and continuous as it is, which I do, I think that's really kind of a key to how we operate. I think it necessitates, if you think about structuring it that way and all the normal day in and day out work that we're going to do over the course of 3 weeks, I think it necessitates piggybacking.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'd have to carve out other times, which would be displacing something else.
Yeah.
If we can, as we think through that, if there's things about the way we set those second meetings up, those committee meetings up, that might help, let's make notes and pass it on to people, because certainly we want to try and create an environment where everybody's in the right frame of mind. That's absolutely one of the goals. Placement of items on consent, active, and first reading agendas. Pretty straightforward, but historically not always something that there was consensus amongst the council on. Anybody have any questions or concerns with how that's been going on the last 4 to 6 months?
I'd just like to highlight one thing at the end of I think it's the second paragraph here. If there's something you want off consent, say so.
Oh,
And
yeah,
we'll pull
thank
it off
you.
consent.
That's, expound on that a little bit. That's a really important
Yeah,
feature.
the idea behind it is the consent agenda, is something that we're all kind of going, man, nobody needs to talk about that. I've got nothing to say. If you got something to say, pull it off, and we'll vote on the rest of the consent agenda separately, and then we can talk to your heart's content on the remaining item, whatever the topic might be. Typically, if it's going to be something that's got any controversy to it, it goes on active anyway.
But if we've missed it for some reason, and it's something that really you've got if it's something you want to say or you want to discuss, don't hesitate to pull it off. It's not going to be offensive to anybody to make that adjustment. It's been made before, and every council member should know they have sort of that ultimate authority to just take something off of consent and turn it into a subject we're going to talk about. I'll keep that
I think
in
you
mind.
pulled one off a couple years ago.
I was going to say,
Yeah,
Greg pulled
I
one off.
probably was the
Yeah.
last one to do it. Yeah.
He's an attorney, he does that.
It happens every year and a
I get
half.
paid by the work. What do you mean?
There's most of the time we're all just kind of following a pattern, but it is important to remember sort of the rights that we have as representatives to affect the process. It is there. People don't sometimes see that because it's not often done, and I would argue that's because we're communicating well and staff's working really hard. But we have that ability, so keep it in mind. Council member new business. This is where we probably have some, I would guess, some dissension in the ranks. This has been something that is, as long as I can remember, has been functioning contrary to what the sort of written version of what it's supposed to be suggests. It has been all over the map, going back as, at least to '07. Exactly who says what during that time has been pretty varied. It's been varied, I think, largely by the individuals on the council, and I think it's been varied by the direction given from the center chair. So one observation I have is that there are council member reports as described in, like, when I say connections with other boards or entities or government agencies.
Hey, Bob, can I stop you?
Yeah.
I think you jumped topics.
Yeah.
Oh, did I?
New business.
Well, let's come back, because I already started.
Okay.
We'll come back to the presentation. I've started a soliloquy, so the Sermon on the Mount isn't over yet. There are subjects that I refer to that way, and my intention of referring to those subjects is to be, how many days till Heritage Fest, right? Martin used to do that with regularity, or there's Grove Foundation, I think stuff came up recently. But one of the things that I'm not totally comfortable with is when we take those and they turn into sort of mini proclamations. There are, and I don't know where that line lies. I can't, sit here and lay it out for you. But there are mayoral proclamations, and they are distinct and they are unique. And if there's a series of proclamations, if everybody gives their version of a proclamation, there's a couple of things. The mayoral proclamations are usually asked for. They're not always, but often they're asked for by specific groups who are looking for the proclamation. Why are they looking for it? They're looking for sort of a village, and it's going to have to go like this, but endorsement, if you will. There's a certain amount of because it is a written document presented by the mayor as a function of a specific authority that lies in the mayor and asked for and then returned, there's an amount of authority and officialness to that. And what's implied, one of the things that I've struggled with, I get way more proclamation requests than I do. And one of the reasons that I've struggled with that, and what I'm getting to why some of the conversations we've had have been not so comfortable to me, is that I think there's an implied sort of corporate, I'm using that word to say the organization, there's sort of an implied corporate endorsement. when the mayoral proclamation is given, it comes with a stamp. It comes with a village logo attached to it. It's part of the meeting. That has an implication. Now, whether it's always true that the village of Downers Grove is 100% behind that proclamation, I don't know, but I'm working pretty hard to make sure that those things that I issue as proclamations do in fact fall into that category. And so when we, and you need to know too, the process of those is I usually write them and send them through ENZA and get input sometimes from you guys. There's been situations where you guys have weighed in on those as well to try and get them right. And so I'm a little sensitive to when it seems like we have proclamations coming out of council members as a function of council member report, distinctly different from sort of disseminating information about stuff going on in the community. So we need to talk to them about it. You need to know that I'm not totally comfortable with it, and I need to hear what you guys have to say about it. Any additional thoughts? Here's the sermon from Bob. It's over. Sure.
I mean, I guess I see council member reports as an opportunity. I don't like the current writing because it's more towards the negative, and I would rather see council member reports described as more of like a positive community building. Mm-hmm. So to me, I kind of see council member reports to build community, to, like, for example, for B, events sponsored by other organizations, why would we not want to be kind of like the facilitator of information throughout the village where there are good things happening and inclusive things happening, to where, you know, we want to share that with people and make people feel like they're welcome to these events and they're welcome to the village. So I guess for me, I kind of like to see a positive statement that's, again, more towards community building and being a welcoming and inclusive village with regard to both just, you know, demographics, but also, you know, all of our community partners and nonprofit organizations that help make us, you know, the great village that we are. So that's kind of my thought about where this lies.
Yeah, I hate that dot. It is interesting, right, to form a guide or whatever on the negative.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then if you read that, you know, I think it's been, like I said, it's been at least since 2007
Mm-hmm.
before anybody was doing exactly this.
Right.
It's largely been not followed.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one time years ago, somebody suggested we should have all the things that council members, we used to do this. It used to be more common, I think, for people to run down sort of a list of events. I think, you know, you'd get, right now I think we all have, you know, one or two organizations we're kind of attuned to, and so that tends to be what's out there. But I think in the past there was sort of a more deliberate effort by council members to scour for that list. And when that was going on, it got to be weird in its own right? Because now you had 20 minutes of people doing community bulletin board stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so that facilitated a discussion or caused one at the time. And one of the questions asked was, well, should we have some sort of other part of the meeting that was specifically dedicated to other events in the village? Never went anywhere, but just something for this conversation now. It's been a subject that's never been real straight, at least in a long time.
I guess that's what I'd like to see written in the positive then, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hate setting up an expectation based on a negative.
Yeah. No, I agree with Leslie's comments. I'd really like to see item B go away here, because I thought that's what it was exactly for. And, you know, we can't be in tune with certain organizations, but it'd be difficult to, if you had some major event like Rotary Grow Fest or Historical Society or something like that, where I almost feel remiss not to bring that up. I think we do need to draw the line at proclamations, because that's your purview, and you should continue to do that. And I think we should draw the line on trying to create new policy issues. I think that's what new business items are for.
Thinking about the wording on item B, I mean, I get the idea that it's worded in the negative, but I mean, I read it as the Historical Society or the library or Rotary, you know, what have you, being other local civic organizations. I would think that that's part of what is allowed.
I think it should be, and that's what I've been saying,
Yeah.
but I think it's in conflict with the way this
Yeah.
reads.
Yeah, because it
Yeah.
says, shall not address the council with
Right.
regard
Yeah, it's-
to.
Other than the village or other local civil.
Oh, you're using the
civic
other
org-
Oh, okay,
Other
so
than-
you're
Oh,
considering
oh,
that
I
they're
see
local
what you
civic
mean. Okay.
organizations, got it?
Yeah, so I'm considering the
Yeah.
various, charities and
Yeah.
other
Yeah,
not-for-profits
that's fair.
and whatever. I think that fits. Now, I take the mayor's point when it comes to, I think, and I've been guilty of this myself, straying from sort of these guidelines. Maybe we should change them, but, I don't think some of the things that we've been talking about really fit inside of this.
Right.
Proclamations are proclamations. And I don't think it comes along, Mayor, with just the, implied sort of authority of the village. It's express. There's a reason why we're putting the stamp on it. There's a reason the logo is there and whatnot. It is an expressed endorsement of the message that's contained in that document. And there should be a gravity that comes along with that. And I think we've got lots of different ways to communicate what it is that we're interested in and different issues that might be outside of something that ends up in a mayoral proclamation. And whether it be social media or what have you. But I think at least it's currently constructed that the personal announcements kind of says maybe there's some things that don't belong that have been belonging.
Like the birth of your first child.
I was just going to say.
Danny.
Hey, he set me up for that one.
It's really straightforward. How many times are we going to have to hear that one?
The one time I speak, I break the rules. So, I absolutely support reversing this, taking it out of the negative. I think that's the right thing to do. I think, and as is, it still feels rather restrictive, and I absolutely take your point about not needing a number of different mini proclamations outside of the official proclamations. I just believe that this should be less restrictive than more restrictive. I think there are issues that occur. We can talk about how many times we've talked about wearing masks, and even tonight getting the vaccination. That has nowhere in this is that something, and that could be seen as a political or a contentious issue. So I worry that if we get too selective in what we can and can't say, then we may be limiting what we as elected officials we're sort of elected to do. And it's not like I'm proposing that we each get a proclamation section, but I do think there are important things, and we're 7 community members with connections into all different kinds of organizations and people and events that are happening. And forget events, I don't even, because events are fine, but all different kinds of even issues or awareness things that we want to bring to the surface. I view that as the opportunity to do it. So I tend to think in a less restrictive way. I think there is absolutely been a delineation between the official proclamations and some of the reports that I've been a part of and have heard other commissioners, current and past, make. But for trying to make that something less or more restrictive, I just don't think that's the right approach. So whatever we do in the positive, I feel like it needs to have some room for interpretation for each of us, because those, I think, are important parts of what the village councils and each of us as members are set to do. I think I would be concerned about the limitation of what my report could and couldn't have in it, in an effort to limit what may not be important to someone else here on the council or in the public.
Well, I think what we have to be concerned about, and at least cognizant of, at the very least, is the fact that you've got 6 other people sitting up there too, and if you happen off on a topic that I don't particularly agree with, we might end up in the middle of a debate at the end of a council meeting that we really don't need to be in. I think that's more appropriately done outside the chamber. I think probably everybody in the room except for me is pretty good at social media. And I think that's probably a better place to put something like that. Now, that said, there are plenty of topics that we've talked about in council member reports that are pretty easy to tie back to other civic organizations and events that are going on with other civic organizations. So it's kind of it's a little semantic, but it's really a matter of how do you approach it.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off that because I totally understand what you're saying, and I am guilty of breaking this Rule 36. And when we talk about proclamations, I know we all are, but I'm saying so am I am too. When we talk about proclamations, I don't see them necessarily as an endorsement, but more of an acknowledgement. I don't know if that wording is, to me, it's acknowledging something. It's not necessarily endorsing something. I don't know. Those are just semantics, and it really doesn't matter. But that's the word that popped out to me when you said endorsement. I'm like, well, we're acknowledging. Truly, it's an acknowledgement. My fear, Chris, with some of the things that you're saying is that, when one person we're calling it a mini proclamation. So I'll just keep calling it a mini proclamation. When someone makes a mini proclamation, I guess my concern is that, similar to what Commissioner Jose said, that the thoughts of that one person are then potentially seen as the views of everyone sitting up here or the views of the village as an organization, when that may not necessarily be the case, particularly with issues that may be more partisan. We are a nonpartisan board. So for me, I just feel like we need to be careful and cognizant of that. And I don't mean that to say, you can't share your thoughts or you can't, you know what I mean? I just think that those are things that we need to be cognizant of. But I understand what you're saying. We're here and you want to be able to speak to the public. You want to be able to share your thoughts.
Yeah.
I just think, we need to consider each other and we need to consider the village as a whole, and just being careful. I don't know where that line is,
To that point, I've gotten negative feedback for not joining in on talking about certain things.
Correct.
It's like, well, everybody else, I didn't feel the need to, just talk to hear myself talk. Everybody kind of said what I was thinking.
Right.
And the flip side of that is, well, what if I sit there silently when somebody's saying something that I think is abhorrent? There's a lot of different trick bags you can end up in.
So I understand that probably seems frustrating because you're like, I don't want it to be restrictive. Those are just my thoughts that I think we just need to be careful and cognizant, given that we sit in nonpartisan roles, that our views or that whatever we're saying could be, potentially seen as the views of all of us or the views of the village as an organization. And I think, again, I don't know where that line is.
But if I may, I think the difference for me is the proclamation is an official proclamation. So that, as you said, an acknowledgement, I think, is a better word of whatever Mayor Barnett decides to make a proclamation on and the input that he seeks. I think I'll pose this as a question. Do the other commissioners here feel that when each of us is giving a report, that it is representative of what we all think or is important to us? Because it's not the council members' proclamations, it's just our report. So I understand the concept of, like, you may not agree with my proclamation, or excuse me, no, I'm getting the word.
We got that on tape.
Gosh.
It's on tape.
With my report supporting Bicycle Week, although that was a proclamation, but I'm being facetious here. But I think I would give the public more credit to think that just because I said it, that the entire council feels the same way I do. maybe the lack of response to it, but if your turn is already gone, we're not going back through the report to answer on everybody else.
Well, I'll tell you what, if we start getting into some stickier topics, I'm going to ask for it.
And I think that's fine. I don't
think
have a...
But I think that's exactly what we
That's
should avoid.
decidedly not fine. It's not the council debate session, so forget any particular subject. We're not going to take the end of the meeting and turn it into a debate. Nicole said something I disagree with, so I'm going to make sure that she knows I disagree with it and make sure the public knows. That's not conducive to a host of things, from getting along to running a good meeting to having the public understand what we're even talking about. You know, when we do debate things, one of the features of a debated subject is it's prepped. I mean, we're all dealing, again, back to this information subject, right? We're all dealing with the same information, not only us, but the public. They're able to look at agendas and the background information. We're not going to start debating things at the end of a meeting that one of us has decided is the subject du jour. It'll get ridiculous. First of all, 6 people will be unprepared. The public will not be able to follow along, and there's no resolution to it. Right? It's like last loudest guy gets to rule the day. So I don't know what, to Nicole's point, I don't know where the line is, but I would encourage everybody to really think through. I used the word endorsement on purpose. There is some semantics there, but Greg's point about it's not implied, it's expressed. You know, there is a different element to that, and so we have to all be thinking. You know, we may not settle where that line is tonight. In fact, I bet we're not. But this idea that it's not a debate, that when somebody says something, we can't be expecting to have retorts. And that we got to be really cautious about the perception of whether that's an endorsement by this group. So I think that what that should do is it should lead us to, I suspect we can all police this ourselves. I really do. I don't know that there's wording that needs to do it. But if we ask ourselves that, I can tell you when I'm doing an endorsement, one of the things I ask myself is, would 6 other people sign this proclamation? I ask myself that because I think it's that important. If you're in a mode on a subject that question can't be totally answered, maybe it should not be something that we get into there. Bicycle Week. Because it's
controversial.
Bicycle Week, you know, it's not going to be a subject that causes dissension and requires debate. If it's something that you think would require debate or would drive debate, it's a bad setup for the very simple reason that we're not all prepped for it. We are trying to be prepped for stuff if we're going to debate things, whatever it is. And that's not happening. It's one of the, Rich made that comment about new business earlier. You know, one of the things we've struggled with new business is the same thing. How do we handle that? It all goes back to this information thing. The reason Dave calls everybody on Monday morning, the reason everybody, including the public, gets their packet at the same time on Friday afternoon is because what we're trying to do is not put ourselves in a situation where we're operating with different levels of information on a subject. That's the thing we're trying real hard to avoid on every item of a council meeting. And I think it applies to this one too. I just encourage everybody to think that way. Leslie?
I guess that's why I just really would like to see it written a little bit more in the positive among the spirit of building community, because I think that automatically, if you read it that way, you know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of an association that if you're reading something that's in the positive, you're probably going to automatically move towards the, you know what I mean, the more positive community building type of. So I guess that's part of why I would kind of like to see the shift is, I think it'll just kind of shift everybody's mindset to being a little bit more inclusive and building community.
Yeah, not another, that it is a little funky the way it's set up right now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I
you
agree
gotta
with
get
A,
it right.
because we really should not be discussing somebody's candidacy.
Yeah.
But outside of that, I think that it just leads to a better setup and a more positive frame of mind.
Rich, you were wanting to jump in?
Well, I think we need to figure out what is the venue for what could be a controversial subject. And I don't think that's the right venue. I mean, years ago, people would, including elected officials, would write in a letter to the editor. I'm not even sure they still have that.
They do.
They do.
But, you know, we have Facebook, but then we have the thing that 2 of us can't weigh in on those. and just giving me the glaring look. So we have to be somewhat careful with how we do the interface. So I don't know what the best venue is if somebody wanted to bring up a topic that is controversial. I think at the end of the night, on a Tuesday night, particularly if we've not had the opportunity, I like to quote facts and figures as much as I can. Some of those I have in my head, some of them I have to look up. I was in the comp plan again this morning, looking at those things so I could respond to constituent emails. So I would like some time to not be surprised by it. And then there's not even a carryover. If the meeting were to end on something like that, say, well, I had something to say, but it wasn't properly formulated for that venue. And is it more fluff stuff? Yeah, it's more fluff stuff. But we have different things, different areas. And then we also have to be reminded of what's our lane, what are we elected for, what are we responsible for, and are we sticking to that, or are we venturing out into other things?
Chris, to your point, like I'm sitting here thinking about this, and you were like, would anybody be offended if I talked about Bicycle Week? No. No one here, gosh, I need to stop talking with my hands. I keep whacking my mouth. No one here would, but at some point, if any one of us is no longer in this seat, someone new comes in, and they say something that you're like, you know what I mean? That could happen at any, at any given time. Where, the past couple councils, I feel like we've all gotten along very well, we've all been very cohesive, but that hasn't always been the case. And if that ever happens again, that's why I keep trying to caution, right? Like just this careful, very cognizant idea that at some point, any one of us may not be here, and it may be somebody who feels like, well, during my council member report, I'm gonna say this. And to Commissioner Jose's point, you may be sitting there fuming because now it's viewed as something that you believe when it's not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm still struggling with the concept that there's a perception of me saying something and all of you believing it, or giving the perception of all of you believing it. I just don't think that's, personally, I just don't think that would be the case. And I think, when we get into like trying to make sure that the reports are something that we could all agree on, that's getting up to a very, very, very short list. Because, and what I mean by that, potentially it gets to a short list. What I mean by that is some organization that's a Downers Grove organization that one of us supports and I don't. And it's an event that they're putting on that may seem innocuous to you or to you, but it might be something that group doesn't jive with my. I don't feel like, as a commissioner, certainly I'm not going to debate that with you during the commissioner reports, but I also feel like you're right, as an elected official, to promote that event. So if we start getting into this situation where we're trying to evaluate what is proper in this statement, I know it's a slippery slope. I'm not interested in getting and opening up topics of white-hot debate during these reports. And I think if you've seen, honestly, I don't think it's really been an issue, candidly, but I do worry that if the perception of this council is that speak one speaks for all, then that's different. I just don't feel like that's the way it is. It's not how I think the council should be perceived. And yes, as we're voting on things, as issues are coming, I agree. We have to make sure the information is available to all. But if this is a commissioner report, which is clearly just at the end of the meeting, where we're trying to bring awareness to something, whatever that may be, one, I don't think that speaks for everyone, and two, I agree. I said debate, but I was sort of kidding with you. It's not a debate. I was elected, I get 2 minutes of commissioner report, and I want to bring whatever the topics that I feel the constituencies, my constituency, the residents of Downers Grove may be interested in or aware of, and I feel like restricting that to just things that we're all going to sort of agree upon feels a little, not a little, it feels a lot restrictive to me.
Well, I think
That's
there's a
all.
difference between talking about a community event and getting on a soapbox. And I think that's really the distinction, to boil it down, that I'm trying to draw. You know, you can talk about, you know, community events all day, and maybe there'll be some out there that offend some people. I've had people question why I was involved in this organization and that, and hey, that kind of thing happens. But I can tell you that in the last 6 weeks, I've both gotten, as I said earlier, negative feedback based on council member reports, and then given feedback to one of our colleagues. Hey, I'm not entirely comfortable with some of the stuff you said there.
Yeah.
And I think that's a bad trend. I think when you're talking about something that's going on in the community, I think, you know, there's a nexus there that everybody can get next to. But, you know, when you start treating it more as a soapbox, you're going to open. I'm going to stick with the box theme, I guess. You're going to open Pandora's box, because I think you do end up in situations where you're going to end up with debates, and it's not. We should also think not necessarily just about something, you know, an issue we might want to talk about, but something somebody else might end up bringing up. You know, I'm not going to be sitting in this chair forever, and, you know, the next guy or the next woman might bring up something that I think is totally terrible, and I don't know if everybody else is going to necessarily want to debate that topic at that particular time.
I think we got to give ourselves a little room here too in this. You know, if you say I want the freedom to say what I want to say. Right? I've been elected. I should be able to speak. Yeah, that's true. But depending on how you choose to speak or what you choose to speak on, you could put your colleague in a spot where they feel compelled. And I think that's kind of what Greg's talking about. I suspect we can all make choices to avoid this. I really do. I really believe we can do this. The reason I brought it up is because when Greg used the word trend, it does seem to be a different trend in the last 6 months than it was in the prior couple of years. But Nicole brings a good point up. If you go back, you know, maybe 3 councils, I don't know where the math is, but there were different dynamics that were the opposite of what this group has been exhibiting.
Where council members were looking for that gotcha moment.
Opportunities to,
Or
and what
create
happens,
ambush.
and, you know, then so what, you know, let's just take this to the absurd and obnoxious. Should I then talk to everybody beforehand and make sure I call on people in the right order so that the things that are important to me and sound right to me are said last and loudest? I don't want to do that. Nobody wants to do that. And so that's what I mean when I say give your colleagues some room too, because something that's important to you is fair enough. We've all got things that are different important to us, but I bet we can avoid bringing forward the stuff that we know is going to rub somebody sideways and compel them into a position. It's because it is, you know, it's a group think, right? That sounds bad, but it is a group that's sitting there on camera representing the village, saying things that most people are taking away as I heard at the council. You know, it's a little bit of a rabbit trail, but one of the things I've struggled with in the center chair is people do this at the podium. We hear people come up to the podium and say a variety of things that are just simply not true. And yet, I bet, maybe not the two of you because it hadn't been that many miles under the wheels yet, but I bet everybody else here has experienced I heard something about the council meeting. And it wasn't, man. It was somebody at a podium. And so it's been a struggle. That's not really the point of the moment. But those things that are said in that meeting on that camera are not as individual as we all probably think they should be. And I just think we got to really all be super thoughtful about that and avoid putting ourselves in a position where we're misinterpreted or a colleague feels compelled to, you know, punch back on a subject. I bet we can do it.
This gets revisited every 2 years, though, right?
does.
I mean, so like theoretically, we
It
don't
can get
really.
revisited in a month.
I was gonna say, we don't really need to worry about like future councils, right? So like, we should kind of be focused on like the next 2 years, and that's why I'm gonna be the broken record, but I feel like we should set this up in a positive to engender building community as opposed to anything else, right?
Yeah.
To me, that feels like the most positive way to move forward, to where we can all kind of come to some consensus and then work through it if there's any concerns going that way.
And I think to Leslie's point, on a broader sense, if we're not going to settle everything tonight, we can continue to talk as well.
Yeah.
But I think I'm thankful you guys are all willing to actually talk like this. Not every council in the past has been that way.
That's probably why they screamed at each other.
Anything anybody wants to continue on that subject? Like I said, we're not taking votes tonight, writing rules, we're talking.
I would just say thank you for your input.
Thank you all for being candid.
Mm-hmm.
I did skip council member new business. Council member new business, Rich touched on that. That process too, Leslie used the broken record, I'm going to sound like one too. One of the things we're trying to do is make sure everybody's dealing with the same information. So part of the new business process is to try and foster that, right? That people aren't surprised and put into a situation where they're dealing with stuff that they don't have the same information as their colleagues. It should not ever be interpreted as people shouldn't come up with new business. That's, that you are elected for that, as a matter of fact. So any thoughts on that process, whether it's understood or it feels comfortable or appropriate or efficient or?
Let's say I just went through it, and it felt pretty comfortable. I, took a couple more weeks than I planned on, but I feel like having it in writing, we talked about this a little bit in our one-on-one, having it in writing in some way to me is really important because there's the transparency of I plan to put this forward. And so like in me emailing that information to Dave, this way there is a paper trail of kind of when this all got started. So I don't know what that writing should necessarily look like. I feel like mine ended up okay and there were not a lot too many changes at the end. But I do think it's critical to keep the writing portion because that just really maintains transparency and that timing as well so that everybody has a chance to hear the information that you brought forward. Yeah, it's crucial.
Remember too that two things, it's a little bit like pulling something from the consent agenda. You do have the right to write it yourself and insist that those are the words that are used, right? Truth is, staff's trying really hard to help us all, right? To help us get out of our own way and avoid our own pitfalls. And I think at least the folks that have been here for a year or so have all experienced that. The process feels a little tedious, takes a little longer than you might wish, but it results in, I really think it results in better dialogue at the dais, better understanding from colleagues on it.
No, there have been more times than I can count that staff has given me information, research that has led me to not bring forward a new business item than many multiples than the times that I actually have brought forward something. So I think it's a process that works.
Okay, keep going. Public comment. Public comment portion of our meetings has mostly gone, from my perspective, okay, but I'm looking for input. Do we do enough of it? Do we let it go long enough? Should it go shorter? What's everybody's thoughts on the public comment portion of our meetings? You're on videotape for the public.
I feel like the 5 minutes is good. I don't think we've ever had an instance in which things have dragged out so long that people were, starting to lose focus. So I think the 5 minutes is good. I think you do a nice job of informally reminding people that they have 5 minutes. And I also appreciate the flexibility during COVID of allowing people to have it, at various times depending on what's happening in the agenda and what's happening in the community. I think that's gone well.
I think at times, if it's, if we have a full audience, we know that people, I think you're doing a good job at reminding people about the 5 minutes. sometimes we'll get someone who will want to read a multi-page item, and the human voice typically speaks at 150 words per minute. So if someone comes with 1,500 words, they're not going to get that done in 5 minutes. And I don't know if, I know we're not really permitted to ask people's addresses, but would it be inappropriate to ask people to spell their names, their last names?
I don't think so, and this is brought up, and this is going to, you open the door for me. It also goes to, this is related in my opinion, so this is just, I'm speaking from the center chair. I've gotten some hassling from a former commissioner colleague about attire. You guys, we all had this conversation, right? One of the things, Rich, that I'm trying to be super sensitive to is when you approach your village, not you guys, but most people approach their village, they're under some level of duress. They're either mad or scared or need something. And so I'm trying to make that as super comfortable as possible. And so you could have people who have never spoken before a body of anyone, literally, right? Their school council or anyone else. They've never spoken before anybody. You could have people for whom English is a real burden. You can have people who have had really bad experiences in their life with authority at any particular level. And so I would rather take my chances getting the name wrong if the result was that it was a little easier for them. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's overstated, but I just keep thinking that when people come to the village council meeting, in many cases, it's not comfortable. So if we can make that more comfortable, I think that's something we should be trying to do. So doesn't totally answer, but if you're, you could have a long name with not many vowels and a tough time with English, and that could, and you're already kind of freaked out maybe. I just want to make that easy.
Or you have a really long hyphenated name and you're tired of spelling the whole thing out. And now that I have an experience with that.
4 letters in my last name, I spell it every time.
Takes you 5 minutes just to spell
Right?
it out.
Anything else on the public comment portion of meetings?
I just have a question. In terms of commissioners responding to public comment, so I feel like, and it's been said a lot, you do a great job of managing that, but I do feel like I have seen from time to time a request for a commissioner to have a response or to say something, and I'm just curious, I'd love everybody's input in terms of their thoughts on that practice. And you're the one who's seen do it the most, but I'm just, and
Guilty.
And I don't know.
Let me tell you what the practice from my standpoint has been, and then everybody should certainly weigh in.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like goading Danny into talking about his new baby tonight, which doesn't exactly fit Rule 36, right?
It's violation.
There are moments when I adjust on the fly. Generally speaking, it's a little bit like the back end of the meeting. At this front of the meeting, somebody comes and decides they're going to create a debate situation with the council. We want to avoid that because nobody's really prepared for it. And I'll say something, or not me because I'm saying stuff, but Rich will say something, and that'll make Danny mad. And Danny's going to say something, and pretty soon it's a circus of unprepared people speaking on a subject. There have been moments, very few of them, when people have gone after individual council members, not just this council, in the past. And most of the time, the person in the center chair has gone ahead and continued to just be the only person discussing. And that has happened, not just Greg. There's been moments in the past. But I think what I've done, and I think it's been done by mayors prior as well, is there are occasionally situations where you think it's okay because you believe there can be a constrained element to that. But it's kind of runs down that same line. You don't want to turn that into a debate that people aren't ready for. It's not, you never know what somebody's going to come to the podiums to say, and they have the right to say it. And we don't want to do anything that makes that feel like they don't.
Yeah.
But we can really get some people mad. I mean, that's reality. So I think it's best if it's not addressed individually, but you're right. There have been times when I've veered from that. So what's everybody else think about that? It's a great
Generally,
question.
sorry, Bob. Generally, when I've piped up, I've tried to do it in a way that kind of stops the conversation. Let's talk about this after the meeting. Let's do, something like that. And to Bob's point about the mayor kind of continuing to handle it, Mayor Tully, saved me from a pretty bad, what would have been a pretty bad exchange at one point, when a resident, questioned why I had missed a previous meeting and blah 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 whatever. And I'd been at the Science Olympiad with my daughter, and I was about to, express my opinion as to what I thought of that person's opinion. When Tully shut me down, and I'm glad he did. So we do want to avoid a debate, just like we do at the end.
Yeah.
So as somebody who has piped up, if you do it, try to lower the temperature when you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I've never piped up, but I've definitely been the one that's somebody has locked eyes on before. And yeah, I just left it at that, and I let Mayor Barnett handle the ensuing conversation, just because. Yeah, I don't feel like a council meeting is an appropriate time to have that back and forth.
Yeah.
And if somebody wants to talk to me after the meeting, I'm always more than willing to stay and chat with them. So yeah, I'm along the same lines of things too.
I also think it's important to remember, particularly, that if someone at the podium is passionate or agitated, that you trying to engage to kind of stop it is probably not going to stop it.
Correct.
So rather
Yeah.
than just engaging in that back and forth, like Greg did a great job a few weeks ago when he's like, I'd be happy to talk with you after the meeting. I think that was a great way to approach it, and he approached that resident after the meeting. But when people are upset or passionate about something, your response is likely not going to cause them to say, oh, okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah.
So I think best handled one-on-one, not in that format, because I do think the way we sit, to your point earlier, Mayor, it makes people it's very intimidating. So I think trying to have a personal exchange with a resident who's in that, whatever in that mindset is really difficult in that format.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
What I'm usually trying to do if it heads down that road is get everybody back to agreement on civility, not debate what was talked about, but just we're either talking about that here or we're not, and we're talking in that kind of tone and with those words, or we're not, not really discussing the issue. Just trying to circle back to the expectations of a bunch of neighbors and residents and friends and colleagues, and in some case relatives, all sitting in a room talking about something. So I don't know if we always do that well, but we sure try.
Yeah.
I think it's positive that we put our public comments up front. I've attended just a couple of other public meetings where they force the public to wait till the end of the meeting, where they're covering all the normal business issues, and the public wants to speak about something that happens to be on the agenda they're passionate about. So I think it's good that we let people come and speak their piece. We'd like them to stay for the whole meeting, but they don't have to.
And we allow
I agree.
public comment throughout the meeting.
Throughout the meeting as well.
On every single issue, which
like
is
that, too.
awesome.
Yeah,
So
that's
there's
great.
so many opportunities. I think we do that well.
Yeah, I agree.
There have been moments, to Rich's point, in the past, I don't know if I've done it, but I know Mayor Tully certainly did it numerous times, where sort of on the fly adjusted the agenda order as well, for that very reason, right?
Yeah.
If you got 50 people in a room on a subject, don't make it be item 10.
Yeah.
Let them do their thing and move on, so. Council meetings in the committee room. Guys comfortable? We like this?
These are great.
Yeah.
Especially when we get bugles and popcorn.
COVID sort of put the kibosh on it, didn't it?
Fresca, tab.
we've adjusted what we do. You guys have heard the subject of standing meetings, standing committees. We have those sort of technically, but we haven't used them for 10 years, long time. The last time I was on one was with Durkin, and we were talking about fire trucks, and it was a long time ago. I don't really know, because it predates me, what the purpose of them was, but I don't feel like we're missing anything. I think, in fact, it kind of works against this idea that we're all dealing from the same information. The way they were used in the past is council folks had assignment to one of 3 committee headings, and there I think were 2 at each one, excluding the mayor. And subjects would get sort of a further degree of vetting. Maybe it might be finance, it might be public safety. What was the other one? Administrative. And but then you got a situation where 2 people are having way more dialogue, and it's that same thing we talked about earlier when we talked about talking to each other. If 2 people are talking, there's a lot more that goes on there than a set of minutes is going to reveal, right?
Yeah.
There's just a lot more there, and then the meeting's over, and then they're thinking about it some more, and they're talking to a staff person in the hallway or whatever. All of a sudden, there's this accumulation of information that 6 other people or 5 other people don't have, and are now expected to weigh in on. And so I personally think we should continue to not use them if we want to get rid of them. I don't know what that takes exactly, but I think it doesn't help us in any particular way that would offset the losses of us collectively being on the same page with stuff. Anybody disagree with that?
I agree.
Totally agree.
Skip board and commission meetings. We'll come back to that one. We also have had in the past this, there's been a variety of ways we've handled it, but there have been more formal interactions with other government agencies historically. We had, at one point, council member liaisons assigned to various groups, boards, and commissions, but also other entities like District 99, District 58, the sanitary district. We haven't had those in my tenure for a couple reasons. I was avoiding it to focus on something else, and then we had this COVID thing that happened, so we kind of never got to it. But prior to that, in the several years prior, they were also, I would suggest, really underutilized. There were occasionally some named expectations, but I don't think there was any real consistent follow-through. I just don't think it happened. So what do we think about that? Is that an important thing? Is it a piece of what we think our job should be? We should probably not do it because Bob doesn't ever get to it. That's not a great reason.
Well, it has been underutilized for the entire time that I've been on council. And I feel like staff does a really great job of sharing information from any of these entities on a consistent basis. So it's not that I don't want to be affiliated with them on an individual basis or go to their meetings. Mm-hmm. I just feel like we haven't, and I don't know that it's necessary, given how great of the communication staff has with, the relationship that they have with all of these entities and then what they communicate back to us.
Are there some where we're like a part of their...
There are a couple where we're within that group's bylaws, we have a role to play.
So that would be
it's a very short list.
Like the economic development, right?
Downtown
Right,
management.
and downtown management.
DuPage mayors?
Yeah.
And we're
Mayors
always a
and
part of
managers.
DMMC. So to me, those are kind of the ones where, like, regardless, right, we have some sort of participation.
Right. Yeah.
And to me, those would probably be the only ones that I would really be interested in seeing that constant contact with, since we do have, it's so important for us to have that relationship. But yeah, for the others, with the advent of like meetings being online now, it's just, it's very easy to just sit there at home and watch a D99 or a D58 meeting, right? Yeah, I agree. I think we have enough information at our fingertips now that if we wanted to go back and watch something, we could.
Would you say the same for DuPage County?
Yeah. The county, I've watched
Yeah.
county meetings, county board meetings.
But in terms of feeling like there's enough of a purview into.
So one of the things that would happen, let's just say we felt like we needed a
Yeah.
council member that was more of a, observer. They're not really going to be a participant, right? Because they're
Right.
an elected board.
Mhm.
But the county does have a structure that this idea of subcommittees and
Mhm.
such, it would be a full-time gig.
It would be a beast.
Yeah.
It would really. Dave?
I just want to interject here, an update on this. One of the services that DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference now offers and has been offering is they send a person to every county meeting and they summarize it. And I get a copy and Mayor Barnett gets a copy. Just as a practice, we'll just start sending those along to everybody.
Cool.
Because it literally is somebody's full-time job.
Fabulous.
Yeah, well,
How long have they been doing that, Dave?
A couple of years now.
yeah, a little while.
Yeah.
That's a great point,
Cool.
but it also does speak to
Yeah.
what it would actually be like to try and do that with
Yeah.
the county.
Yeah,
There's-
it's a beast.
It'd be nonstop.
There's a lot.
This was a subject to me when I first looked at it. Well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then the more I thought about it, the more I drilled down on it in my brain. I thought, no, this thing is fraught with peril in that, once again, you have certain members of this council that would know more about something. Then also you get the opportunity to get sucked into someone else's controversy and going out of our lane and what we're supposed to do into theirs. I'm sure the mayor doesn't appreciate it when that happens to him. And so if we were to formalize this and have to attend every, pick a meeting here, I think that would dilute us as well. I also like that at the senior staff level that those liaisons are there. I think that should be continued.
Yeah.
Let the professionals who do this for X hours a week,
I agree.
interface on important things, report back to us as necessary.
Okay. All right, we'll continue on. Coffee with the council. Coffee with the council is my favorite activity. You guys are all obnoxious.
Great. Next
Every
up.
one of you. It's a done deal. I think there's a done deal. Did I hear that tonight?
Yeah.
Coffee with the council is obviously something that we have done in the past and have not done of late. But given the world of COVID and the situation we're in now, we certainly could. And I have, since everybody's chuckling, for those that are watching at home, I have struggled with this because I'm not a big fan. But it is true that part of our job is making ourselves available. I can appreciate that. Are we all feeling like we want to get those rolling again?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, I enjoy them.
I'm a big fan for a couple of reasons.
Uh-huh.
One is that it's my Pete's Coffee Day. Okay? That's
Actually,
number
same,
one.
same.
See? Pete's. It's, for us Southsiders, there's no easy,
No easy
sometimes we're
Pete's?
not heading in that direction.
Yeah.
So that's my Pete's Day, first and foremost. But secondly, I do think that, I remember back to one Coffee with the Council, and I shared this with staff when we were discussing this, when the protesters were at North and the students and the staff came.
I think it was at the library, right?
That was at the library,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
a Coffee with the Council. And just the fact that, I know that Coffee with the Councils are not super popular, highly attended events. But the fact that we were there and available at that point in time for those students and for those staff to come and talk with us. I mean, I was emotional, they were emotional. I just feel like it's the idea of making ourselves available to be available. And if people come, great, and if not, that's okay, but we're at least putting it out there that we're there to talk in a casual situation with our Pete's coffee, dressed in jeans and not in a suit jacket. I think that that's important. And, it's once a month for an hour. Sometimes we're there a little longer depending on, if we're talking about a specific issue. But I think back to that one in particular and it being so important that we were there and available.
Yeah. I agree. I've had some like really great conversations and made some really cool connections with people that I might not have ever had a chance to meet because they aren't necessarily comfortable with coming up to the podium, but they were interested. They're more adept at that one-on-one conversation. So yeah, I mean, even if it's just for those few people a year, I feel like it's worth it.
Well, I know it's a long way for you, Mayor, so if you want
I don't disagree with anything you're saying, and as I
Yeah.
said, I recognize that it's
Yeah.
part of our obligation is to be available. I appreciate that.
I do have
Office
one
hours,
comment
nobody
about,
shows up, but when they do, it's important, right? When you're a
Right.
TA.
Yes.
Sorry.
I do have one comment about the November one at the fire station. I do remember attending that a couple of Saturdays before I was elected, where there was an actual budget workshop where the council all rolled up their sleeves and, went over the various questions and line items. I was surprised that we didn't do it, I guess that would have been 2 years ago, pre-COVID, only because I thought, oh, this is always done, at least, in the couple of years that I attended it, where
Yeah.
it was more of a
we went away
detailed
from
line-by-line workshop
So
item.
there's, if I could, Mayor, and the
Yeah.
budget procedures, for many years, we had a council meeting, staff and council-driven review of the budget that took place on Saturdays at Fire Station 2.
Okay.
That was usually the first meeting in a series of many. About 2 weeks later, or 3 weeks later in that process, was coffee with the council dedicated to the budget. And the whole idea there is that is resident-driven budget discussion, whatever a resident wants to bring up. So we still do the resident-driven coffee with the council budget edition.
Okay.
What we've changed is the budget process seems to have required less line item approach in diving in because we have engaged so heavily at the strategic level in the last couple of years. And the last couple of those Saturdays in the line item approach, we ended up getting out of there in such a short amount of time that we ended up just moving them to Tuesday night.
Okay. Got it.
Those felt a little like coffee with the council when we did them, because we had coffee and we had usually some donuts out in the foyer, and people would hang around, and so it felt a lot like coffee with the council. It is a little bit like some of the earlier conversations. When Chris was talking about the strategic meetings. I would suggest if we're doing our process well, each of those pieces is less burdensome. And so that's what happens, we'd get to the point where that meeting didn't amount to much. But the resident portion of it was always valuable because it was usually a short list of folks, but oftentimes the questions they had were I'm going to say out there, and that sounds terrible. I don't mean that's not the right choice, but it was things that we weren't thinking of. It was things that weren't just for whatever reason on our mind, and so that was valuable to hear that and say, that's an interesting thought.
Different perspective.
Yeah. Okay, coffee with the council is going to be when, Dave?
We'll actually take a look we'll start up again in August. We'll pick the recurring Saturday.
All
You can
right.
ride your bicycle there.
Pick on the mayor time. I get it. All right. All right, communicating with the public. Another subject, we should just make sure we're all on the same wavelength in terms of expectations with each other. We communicate in a lot of ways. Greg mentioned that earlier. He's our resident needs help with social media guy. And Doug is sitting over there in the corner, the opposite end of the spectrum. But there are so many ways for us to communicate. And as you guys all know, I'm sure you've always experienced, between your cell phone, your email, and direct messenger, you are being communicated with on a really regular basis, right? There's a lot of inbound communications that don't go through sort of the historic, structured way. And so there are 7 people here, and there are probably 7 different degrees of engagement in that process. I know there was a colleague in the past who used to leave everything on auto reply. That's the other end of the spectrum, right? So how do we expect to handle that? Does anybody feel uncomfortable in that role? Does anybody feel uncomfortable with what they're observing, either from colleagues or other elected officials. I mean, there's certainly nationally, there was an interesting way of handling Twitter for a while. We haven't done that here. These are the kinds of things we need to make sure that we all have the same expectations on each other, just so that and it's not to limit anyone, it's to make sure that we know what to expect.
Are we
Anybody?
moving down to
Yeah.
responding to resident
Got any
inquiries now?
thoughts? Well, they're related.
Okay.
They're
fair
related.
enough.
So there's a little table there with all the bullet points of the things that are in mind right now, and doesn't include the next 62 social media things that are going to happen in the next 2 years. Anybody got any thoughts? Greg mentioned he's not so great at it. I think he's underselling himself. But are
Looking
people
forward to
comfortable
your
with it?
Next Twitch video.
Just will you see my TikTok?
Yeah.
Gee.
I was just going to ask why
TikTok.
Doug isn't on
Yeah, exactly.
Or Instagram.
It's coming.
TikToking.
It's
Is he,
coming.
are,
Do you
you,
even
are we
call
on
it that? I
Instagram?
don't know.
I don't
I have no
Instagram.
idea.
Are we on Instagram?
No.
I don't
I'm
Instagram,
sitting here with a
but
paper
there
copy
you
of
go.
our copy.
Exactly. Exactly. That's awesome. So I think from a communicating with the public standpoint, I think it's great. Everything's top. Like, I see it. I've started following some other local communities to see what they're doing. I think we're doing great. And I'm sort of in that space. So
You feel like that there's sort of two angles, right? There's the village work that's
Yeah.
done officially that
Correct.
Doug's cranking
Yes.
out, and then there's the stuff that people are also doing.
yes, I think where I'm candidly struggling is the way that as requests come in and comments to us, how that's handled as a group. Or I know it's being handled, but because of Sunshine, it's hard to know what's getting responded to.
Yeah.
Is it getting responded to effectively? Like you said, we all probably have a different degree of engagement. The engagement part, I think I have down. It's more trying to understand just how we can be more efficient. It's tough. It's super tough, but more efficient in just understanding that something has gone out in a way that, okay, that has answered that question or responded to that in a way that I don't feel like I have to repeat or knock on staff's door, that type of thing.
So, Chris, do you mean are you talking more email? Are you talking social media? Like, what outlet?
Email, definitely email, yeah. Social media, I sort of don't feel the need to if it's not official, unless I feel like it's something that someone is crying out for something, and I see great work from a lot of the commissioners here of like, hey, you should do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
I think that's been fantastic.
Email's sort of the most obvious one, and maybe the one that's in front, because it's so easy for the public to hit everybody at once, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I know there are times when one of us gets some sort of an inquiry through another channel.
Well, and that's why I wanted
And
to
respond,
what you were talking about.
and we respond to it, and to Chris's point, it might be helpful if somehow we all were better aware of that. I mean, you got this whole OMA thing, ends is probably breaking out in hives over there.
Right.
But that, there really is an awful lot of that goes on, and that isn't necessarily an email. And so, I don't know the answer, but I think it's a great point.
I mean, in those cases, which have been rare, I usually ask people just to send me the exact thing to my village email, and then I disseminate it that way. But when something comes in where it is a blanket to all of us, mayor and council, I don't know. I've tried long and hard to think about a way, and it's just tough. It's just tough to do that. I don't know if to really make everyone aware that things are being responded to, or in a way that we feel like, okay, that's addressed.
Yeah, it'd be great if folks sitting over there could figure something out.
Well, I do feel like sometimes staff will, before I even see an email, I'll see a blanket email from staff back to that person. That's helpful. I think in the situations where that's not necessarily always able to happen is what is the struggle.
Exactly.
One of the things that is tough is that this really is like turning into 24/7 comms, right? To your point, sometimes that happens, but but that only is probably because it happened at a moment when
Right,
staff
exactly.
saw it and was already ready, right?
Right.
And that
Because like
may
I
or may
said,
not be the
sometimes
next
I
one.
don't even see it until I get a chance to
Yeah.
go, and then I'm like, oh, staff already responded to this.
If there was some system that we could dream up that would just sort of help, that would, be consistent with the Open Meetings Act and all the expectations people have about transparency, but still allow for us to know. I mean, I think it's been like what's been said, right? You hate to have an email sent to all of us and then have 7 people spending time, either answering it themselves or trying to
Right.
get answers out of staff. If we all get the same email and we don't know the answer, what do you think happens next? Now there's 7, now there's 8 emails on it, right? Because there's the one we all
And there's
got.
7 of us
And there's the
sending an
7 of
email
us
to
sending an
Dave.
email to
Yeah,
Dave, hey, did you
right.
see this?
Yep.
Asking for the
You know,
factual information.
And now there's, so all of a sudden,
Yeah.
so it's a totally valid concern. You guys got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity. So, council gets an email sent to all 7 of you at once, and Mike and Enza and I are copied on those. When we see an item that we know for sure the council is unaware of because it's been at a staff-only level and we've not briefed you on anything, that is the time when you will see a staff immediate answer. Because like when somebody calls in asking what is going on with this building permit or something like that, well, we know that the council does not have information, and so we immediately get as much information out to all parties as possible. Also, on requests that come in on code enforcement items, whether they've already started and they're happening or this is the first time, we usually respond to those as well. The areas where it gets challenging is where there's policy level stuff or stuff that has been talked to and informed to the council. Our role is less clear, so we usually sort of wait to see what happens. Some council members copy staff members on their responses. We find that very helpful. Some council members don't, and then we'll talk on our Monday call and we'll kind of catch up on those things. What we've learned here is there's an opportunity to create more awareness of what's happening. The challenge is compliance with the Open Meetings Act. We always comply with the Open Meetings Act. It's something that's incredibly important to the integrity and trust of government. So we are going to look for ways to do both those, comply with the OMA and create more awareness. So we'd like a couple weeks to kind of take a crack at what that system might look like.
Well, usually when I get those, the biggest question is, okay, what's the factual information behind this? So what I've been doing is, fire off or forward to Dave, can you give me the facts behind this? And then sometimes I know 5300 Belmont was a great example. There was a lot of meat in an issue that we weren't really supposed to get involved with because it was a by right building, but we were getting pulled into it by constituent concerns, and there was a lot of facts behind that. One I had to kind of search myself is when did Ellsworth go in? It's 1962 when Magnetrol went in and that industrial park went in. So it's useful, particularly on the meeting things, if you guys took the position of at least getting the factual points back to the council. The official answer that comes from the village manager is typically going to be more succinct because you're not trying to create policy there. I think we have more purview of inserting our own opinions or our own feelings about it, but we're elected officials, so we're expected to opine on those things like that. I wouldn't expect staff to give anything more than, here's the answer to the question. Have a nice day.
One of the things that is a challenge with this is that you kind of led right to, Rich, is, excuse me, when we give an answer, we need to work really hard. This is a little bit like, this is kind of a dovetail with the conversation about councilman reports. We need to be working really hard to either be essentially parroting the specific data we've gotten from our team, or making sure people realize that this is not this is an opinion and not a council policy, because it does not take much to get into policy questions. There's even on an enforcement thing, right? It can pretty quickly become a policy question that we're not really in a position to speak on behalf of anybody other than ourselves. And so it's important that we all think again, like the conversation earlier about each other and the role we play as it interacts with each other, even when we're interacting one-on-one with the public. That can get tricky, because people will hear, and they'll hear from one person, and what they will hear is something that either makes them mad or makes them happy, right? But it may not be current council policy. So it's just important that we're all really thoughtful about that. It's not to discourage anybody from communicating with the folks they represent. Just make sure you're really, really thoughtful about that part of it. It's not uncommon for me to say, you really need to understand that this, I'm not speaking for the village.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, as a starting point for a conversation.
I'll often say that, I'm just one member of
Yeah.
7, and
Right.
this is where I'm going on this policy, or I want you to understand when I vote why
Right.
how I've gotten there.
And
those
those
are
ones
typical.
are the
That's
easiest
usually
ones to answer, like, where are you on this?
correct. Yeah.
Those are the easiest ones, and I think for the rest of them, I mean, I forward stuff to Dave
Yes.
all the time, and I'm like,
Yes.
can I get more information on this
Same.
before, and I'll wait to respond.
Same.
You know, or I'll say to the resident, I'd like to get more information on this, let me get back to you within 24 or 48 hours, something like that. And I'll go to Dave and say, hey, what's the best way to, what's going on with this issue, or what's the best way to, to frame this or to say this, just to make sure that it's aligned with, with the village and what's really going on.
In the law.
Right.
And the law, yes, and the law. So,
Got to throw that in there, too.
It's a little important.
Do folks feel any constraints that they're uncomfortable with, or obstacles to this that they wish we could remove somehow?
No.
No, I don't think so.
I mean, I like to copy David on my responses, because I also want the residents knowing that, I assume some accountability in my communication, and it gives him the heads up. The challenge for me is I just want to be accurate, want to get the facts, and I think that helps close the loop. But, I almost always think, okay, who else is answering this? And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
to what
Exactly.
extent? Thank you for your thoughtful email. Best regards, Rich. I almost never do that.
Your email has been received. I appreciate the inquiry. Be back to you soon.
Yeah. And why I'm checking right before bed, I have no idea. Because that leads to nothing good.
Right.
Related to all this, and smack dab between those two subjects, is the idea of responding to inquiries from the press. I have almost always let those be done through Doug's department. I think that's really the right thing to do. If those are not, what do you think about a policy question, right? Those are different. They may be emergency related or disaster related or legal related, and I think they warrant, because the other thing that happens, right, is you lose control. If you send an email to somebody that emailed you, that's one thing. When the Tribune prints it, it's an entirely different thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that letting that stuff run back through Doug's department is the right thing to do, and I think we should continue it. I'd welcome anybody that felt differently about that.
Totally agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
I agree.
Neighborhood meetings is still on the list here. These happen more often than we probably think. And what I think the reality is that the only ones that we're aware of are either in our own neighborhood or when it becomes some sort of a big policy issue. And so what that means is, reality is we as a group treat them all a little differently. We don't treat them all the same, right? Because most of them we don't even know about. And then there's the one that becomes, should we, pave over something and put a sidewalk where it doesn't belong or whatever, and all of a sudden it becomes a meeting that we're all attuned to. Any thoughts on how we're handling those now and whether we're comfortable continuing to do them that way or what our roles ought to be in those meetings?
I'm good. I mean, I've even avoided the ones that have been in my neighborhood.
Oh, I went to
I
the
don't wanna
one,
set the-
I went to the one in my neighborhood, and I thought it ran very well.
Is it stormwater?
Yes, it was stormwater related, yeah. I sat back and didn't say anything, but.
Well, it's an interesting dynamic, right? Because there is certainly, I don't think I've been to one in a long time, but you can have an effect on them. I don't know if it's positive or negative, but if you're there, if you were able to sit back, that's great. People, I think, the few that I was at years ago, people always expected to hear from the elected official, and it's not our meeting. Not only is it not our meeting, we're probably ill-prepared. So I don't know. I have not gone to one in a long time on purpose. Anybody else gone to any? Greg
just
says
have
he's skipped some. Leslie's gone to one.
I mean,
What-
the one that I went to ended well, and everyone was pleased with. I just kind of sat back and watched it all happen.
Did people let you do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a couple people, like, in my neighborhood who are, will look out for me and be like, Leslie doesn't have to answer everything, y'all, so. There's kind of an
It's good to have
there's kind of an expectation there that I was going to sit back and, let them discuss things. So it worked out quite well.
So I assume because I was in your neighborhood, you were made aware of it. Are there means by which we, as council members, would be
Generally not.
No.
When they turn into a big issue, and at that point, there's people bombing our inbox anyway.
Okay.
And sort of we do, but those
sort of-
meetings are going on, as a deliberate part of delivering a high-quality service to our residents, trying to engage them, and they're going on all the time.
Yeah.
They're usually public works related, or development related, but.
Right, I was just going to say, there were just ones on development that was voted on this evening, and because that was such a large topic, we were made aware that those meetings were happening.
Actually, I do have a point, and if this is more of a boards and commissions discussion, I'm fine holding it, but with Washington and Maple, this is one of the few times where the neighborhood was given information before the Plan Commission had information before the Village Council. So we started getting emails from the people who attended those meetings, and I was ill-prepared because I hadn't seen the packet. And I wonder if there is an appropriate vehicle to get that in the hands of Village Council members, at that time.
With that specific one, I got, I'm sure, the same inquiries everybody got, right? That were 10 minutes after the neighborhood meeting was over. And I just reminded everybody that there was a process in play. That we would be made aware of what went on at those meetings and made aware of the Plan Commission meetings, but that at that point in the process, I didn't really have a role.
Right.
So if I could jump in, one of the things I just learned is that we use the term neighborhood meeting to refer to two entirely different types of interactions and processes. The neighborhood meeting as written here is informational about a project that has no policy discussion at all.
Like a
We're
paving
telling
project.
the neighborhood what they can expect from their village in terms of a construction project that has already been approved. And any kind of interaction we're receiving there is literally at the ground level, like details that our engineering staff would like to know before something is built.
Yes.
And staff sharing information with the neighborhood, this is what you can expect on the schedule and the impact to your driveway and all these things, like very detailed level. Just a side note, our staff is fantastic at this. This is what they do day in and day out. Those don't even really have a role for any sort of leadership or management staff because we are ill-prepared and we're frankly not skilled in it. The other neighborhood meeting is part of our zoning review and approval process. And the good news is we just finished a policy level discussion on how those should run. And we got great policy direction on the council that said the neighborhood meetings that we have now as a requirement for any rezoning, PUD, et cetera, are working quite well as an early look process that is designed to inform the resident before the Plan Commission sees it. Those are filled with policy decisions, and they ultimately land as we had tonight. So we'll make sure that we are making a distinction in the neighborhood meetings as we talk about to avoid that confusion.
So with that distinction, does anybody feel, like they think their role or the role of the council should change or be adjusted or?
No. I think if we can set expectations, is that, the council is supposed to view this at a point in time after following the process. And, with the Plan Commission meetings, those are public hearings. And that's why the testimony is sworn testimony, and it gets part of the record. If somebody is opposing a project, the petitioner has the right to hear in public what that opposition is, and then respond to that. So probably like you, Bob, I responded and said, we really need to let this play out. I'm really not even supposed to be engaging on this until it comes through the Plan Commission process. So, if that's the right answer, I'm fine with it. I don't know. I'm kind of opening up to you guys. Would you like a preview before it goes to a neighborhood meeting about a project like that? Or would you rather wait till it finishes? Well, we're going to see it when it's published in the Plan Commission agenda.
I worry that my experience is old at this point, a couple of years probably, since I went to anything like that. But I worry that, contrary to Leslie's experience, that there would be expectations of people at that meeting about our engagement in the meeting itself.
But also, to be clear, my neighborhood meeting was what Dave was referring to, where everything was already done, and it was just a couple of engineers saying, these are the plans, this is what you can expect, let's chat about it, right?
I think we're screwing up what the
Yeah,
neighborhood meeting
yeah, that was
is, including myself.
that was the neighborhood
which
meeting
has
that
now
I
been
went
clarified.
to. It wasn't what Rich was talking about.
Right.
Those
Yeah,
are
either-
two different neighborhood meetings.
I'm glad that that it went well for you.
Yeah, there was no
But
policy
at
there.
any of those situations, you can have, if we're sitting there can be, I'm thinking about Grand Avenue flooding. There can be this expectation that you're on the council, and I don't like what's being presented here. What are you going to help me do about it? And it's so far from our role at that point.
Yeah.
I think what's best if we're not, I think that whether it's a CIP-related thing that's informational, there still are people that are saying, I wish you'd move this here, I wish you'd do this instead, you got to make sure you resod or fix my garden, whatever it is. And that's really not where we are. That's, I think it's best if we're out of those things.
I think you have to let the process play out.
Yeah.
I think it'd be useful if we had the heads up that it was going to happen, so we weren't blindsided, but I think the right answer and the legal answer is that we let the process play out, and it's a process, for a purpose. And it's not appropriate for us to intervene particularly before it goes to Plan Commission.
I'd just like to make a suggestion to change one of them from neighborhood meetings to something else.
That is a note we are taking away.
This is an FYI.
It seems so clear when we wrote it. I don't know what happened.
Sure. It seems so clear you wrote it twice.
I knew what that didn't mean, but I couldn't figure out where to insert it into the discussion.
That's why we're having this meeting, exactly why. Last thing on our list is council-directed work by staff. This is, I think, pretty obvious why there's some commentary on this and why there's some guidelines that we have, right? Because we don't want 7 people dreaming up work every day. But does anybody wish parts of it were different in some way? Or have questions about how to engage with it or implement it?
I think, like Greg said before, it works well where you want to figure out if it's something that you want to pursue or not. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, again, only as one of the new guys, just the format by which these requests are made, it seems a little open, like we have the right to have 4 hours of staff time. Maybe some direction that maybe from staff that might be helpful in honing in what information or how that request is presented. I don't want to say like a template, but I feel like just understanding what are the key things that staff is going to want to know to leverage the 4 hours in a useful way. I don't know if that can be done because I know there's a lot of different requests.
Yeah, the scope
But
is
as a
pretty huge.
as a new guy trying to figure out like what the parameters might be.
I'm going to try and speak for Dave, and then Dave's going to correct me.
Okay. Perfect.
I think what really happens here is that you've got some idea, whatever it is, whether it's, you know, I dream up, I make them crazy, I drive up stuff all the time. But whether it's just an idea that's in your head, or it's a new business thing, or and what really happens is there's a conversation first. And our staff has, my experience for a long time, and I think those that have been here a while would echo this, always takes that conversation and says, how can I help you get what it is you're after? And sometimes that involves 15 minutes of redirect. But if it looks like it's going to approach something that requires more time, then they help formulate what it is you're asking for.
Great.
You know, because they do not want to waste time.
Right.
It's and what's important for us to remember is to not be afraid of engaging in that process. They sometimes I think it probably is not uncommon for elected officials, particularly new ones, to be a little reluctant to do that. Just don't be.
Yeah.
They absolutely will help you through it. And it I think Greg's made the point on the new business thing. Sometimes it results in I'm going to change my mind. Other times it results in real great progress that the council benefits from one person having brought up.
Yeah.
Go ahead and do it. Just know that that's really, instead of a template, that's really probably how it's going to go, because anything that's on your mind could result in going down this road. So you sort of can answer that question for yourself. What would a template look like?
Yeah.
We're lucky we have a really great staff that can somehow disseminate what you're asking quickly and with thorough information. We're very lucky in that sense.
I want to add too that we should, you know, again, this is where I make them nuts, but talk to each other too, right? If you're saying to yourself, I got an idea, it's okay to ask somebody else, hey, I got this idea I was thinking of. You know, we got to be mindful of Open Meetings Act and being transparent and stuff, but as you're working through something, it's not a bad idea to talk to a colleague before you go talk to staff. And then staff will help square you up again. But really, I mean, we're all here for each other too. So if you've got an idea, particularly the folks that are new, and want to know how to start that conversation, ask a colleague. All right, we're going to punt for the moment on boards and commissions. And it's also 10 to 10. Not the most efficient meeting we've ever run, but I think an effective one. I appreciate you guys all just talking. This is how we get better as a team, and I really appreciate it. Anything anyone wants to throw into the hopper for tonight? Otherwise, we'll continue this with a board and commission meeting sometime in the future.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all. and
Well, I
good night.
really felt like I was